alliance between the US and the UK, like our brothers.
The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor.
Everything that happened to you was a personal insult to us, and it felt that way. Our alliance then, it wasn't even questionable. That was the mentality. Tell us where you want us, tell us where we need to be at what time, and we'll be there.
Do you feel like it's still that way militarily and just not that way politically, or is there even a fracture that you see today in the military?
I call it the biggest political military faux pas in modern day history. A lot of people, the Americans, the bullies of the world. I'm like, well, someone's got to fucking do it. We've had that alliance from day dot. And just to see a slight fracture externally from the military, with all the bullshit that's going on, that to me cut like a dagger.
When hunting isn't about hunting at all. Team Dog features comprehensive and customizable meal plans with dry and raw food options to meet your dog's unique nutritional needs, including digestive sensitivities, allergies, or selective eating. Did you know combining 75% dry food with 25% raw food delivers robust, nutrient-dense meals for your dog? Be your dog's hero with Team Dog. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He's a former Special Forces commander in the UK's Special Boat Service, or SBS, 9 Parachute Squadron and Royal Marines. He's conquered Mount Everest in K2. He's the author of several fiction and nonfiction books, also the host of several TV shows that were hits, SAS Who Dares Wins, SAS Australia, and a number of podcasts. He's also the stunt double for Harry in Mobland. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Ant Middleton.
I like it, mate. I like the last bit of
that. Have you seen or watched that show? He's got to be a huge hit over there, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Is he just like A-list of A-list kind of guys?
It's because he looks like me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Or you look. Yeah. He looks like you, not you look like him, right? Have you met him?
No, I haven't. No.
He seems like the kind of guy that would be, I guess, well sorted or fits in with kind of the veteran community over there, just with. It was the reorg charity that he's a part of, and just kind of the guy he seems like he is. I'm curious, is there kind of a vibe or a feeling that you guys have towards him? Like, is he a respected guy or not really? Or
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's very well respected. He gets involved.
Yeah.
He's not scared to roll his sleeves up and and voice his opinions. So no, mate, he keeps himself to himself.
Yeah.
But he's a great guy, well respected.
Yeah, seems like it. What's the last full book that you've read?
The last book that I wrote was called Military Mindset.
Oh, okay.
So I've done 5 non-fictions up to now. So my first book was First Man In. That was sort of an autobiography or memoir with life lessons, my life lessons.
Yeah.
Zero Negativity was my next one. Then The Fear Bubble. Then The Wall. And then Mental Fitness. And what I wanted to do with this is sort of my last non-fiction book, was encapsulate all of those books into one. And ultimately, when I looked at them and I wrote them, I thought to myself, what gave me the tools to be able to really, encapsulate and talk about emotional intelligence, psychological resilience, physical prowess, and business, even going into entrepreneurship. It was the military mindset that I adapted throughout my time in the MOD. So I thought I'd just sort of round it off nicely, encapsulate everything into military mindset. And when I look back at it, it started from a very young age when I joined when I was barely 17.
Yeah.
My latest book is Military Mindset.
Yeah. Is that the one that you're most proud of, or is there one that you're kind of the most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of my first one, First Man In.
Yeah.
Because I talk about my military days, but also I go quite raw with my first book. I remember passing it over to the legal team at HarperCollins, who are my publishers, and they said, "Are you sure normally we sign this stuff off and we're happy, if you want to put yourself in the firing line. But you sure you want to, mention some of these things? And they weren't about the military, it's about my personal life, some of the fuck-ups that I'd done, but that I'd overcome and, held myself accountable for and sort of pushed through. So I would say that's my proudest book that I've written. But when it comes to self-help books, the fear bubble, when I talk about climbing Mount Everest and, reinventing yourself and not being scared of failure and really tapping into the emotional intelligence side of things, I noticed a lot of similarities with the emotional intelligence side of being a tier 1 operator. Of controlling your emotions, of controlling your fears and your phobias, not only for yourself but for your muckers. So I'd say first man in, then the fear bubble is probably a close second.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Is there I guess kind of a similar view towards guys like you or us writing books in the UK as there is here, where it's kind of frowned upon? I mean, it's like, it's kind of the 80-20 rule. I mean, 10% are like all for it, and they're probably the ones writing it. 10% are vehemently opposed. 80% are like, yeah, whatever. But like, do you catch any shit, or is there some of that kind of, hey, you should be a silent professional flack that you get from any of your guys?
God, I still catch shit now, Mike. And I started really putting my head above the parapet in 2015 when the first series of SAS Who Dares Wins came out.
Yeah.
And that was just a TV show of a diluted, sort of reduced version of United Kingdom Special Forces selection process. And when I put myself on camera for that, that's where it started in 2015, and I still catch flack now, let's call it. And we're in, what are we in, 25 now, 2025. So there's a 10-year process here. Don't get me wrong, it's getting less and less because people realizing that I'm making a career out of it and that I'm actually, helping with recruitment. I'm helping, people, joining the military, whether that's the Marines, the Paras, the Special Forces. So on the flip side of things, because I've had the resilience to see it through, it's starting to pay off and people are starting to be a bit more accepting about it. But at first, mate, it was a tough pill to swallow. Constantly getting headshots, but also realizing that when I left, that I wasn't in the military anymore.
Yeah.
I think that was a big wake up call for me, because when I left and I kept my foot in the pond, or one foot in the pond, if you wish, I realised that, they weren't paying my bills. I had a big family. They weren't putting food on the table. That I had to go out there and sort of, without the top cover of the military, now look after myself and after my family. And when I realised how brutal that process was I don't know what it's like in America, but when you leave in the UK, it's like, you're gone.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. We owe you nothing. You owe us nothing. Yeah. Away you go. And once I managed to sort of process that very quickly, then I just thought, just do me, do my family, and rebuild a whole new team, sort of outside of that military world, which I'd done. Yeah,
no, I agree, and I mean, results speak for themselves. I mean, I think focusing on that shows it was the right call. And how
about for yourself, Mike? Did the same as you?
Same, yeah. I mean, my first book came out in 2013. And similarly, there were a few guys that would send me messages or whatever saying like, dude, what the fuck, But, again, like the percentage of guys who are supportive versus not is overwhelmingly, most people are supportive. But I think for any of us, you're kind of, you have that silent professional thing kind of beaten into you while you're in. So while you're in, it's like you're the gray man, you don't talk about it, you don't tell anybody about it, and then so when you get out, it's like this polar opposite shift, and it is hard to get used to, and I think it's hard to hear, because, the community, your reputation is everything when you're in, not that it doesn't matter when you're out, but when you're in, I mean, that's why you work where you work, or who you work with, what you get to do, what you don't get to do, it's all based on what everybody thinks of you. And so to have anybody, kind of call you out and say, "No, you're a fucking shitbag," or what, it's like that's hard to hear coming from that community,
But the thing about that, Mike, what I found out is when people call you out for being a shitbag, you've probably never worked with them before.
Yeah.
You probably just cross paths,
Yeah.
once in a blue moon, But the people that I worked with, and that I served with, that I hit the ground with,
Yeah.
they were always super supportive because they knew the operator, they
Same.
knew the individual, they knew that when I was encapsulated in that world, that again, that silent professional, go in, go out, do your thing, don't talk about it, that was always present. So when I left and I started receiving sort of, like you said, flack and people texting me or going, so-and-so's been talking about you, so, and I'm like, I don't even know that dude. He was in a different squadron. He was in a different, I thought he was a friend of mine.
Yeah.
However, now he's talking behind my back. And you sort of, it's a bit bitter pill to swallow, but you go, right, I've never ever had that from someone that I've been boots on the ground with, where I've looked to my left and to my right, they're by your side, and you're driving together, you've got the same objective, the same mission to achieve. Never had that, so that's why I can sleep well at night.
Yeah, same here. I mean, any grief or shit that I caught from anybody, it was never anybody that I knew really well or ever worked with, so that's a good point for sure. If time travel was possible, where and when would you go?
If time travel was possible, I'd probably go back to Rome, when the Roman Empire was there and the Colosseum, because there was that transition between military dominance and then sort of a political sort of era, a new dawn, shall we say. So I think the merge between, military rule and then, the politics sort of taking over, or the Senate, if you wish. I think that would have been a fascinating time to live in, because you had the best of both worlds. And I'm super interested, obviously, in the military, hence why I joined, but I'm also super interested in politics. So I would like to have seen the rise and fall, or the merger of those two come together.
I think it'd be cool to kind of take a shot at Leonidas, so to speak. Like just see, like a grappling match, or just kind of see. It would be so fascinating to see what they were really like. How, I mean, obviously they were phenomenal fighters and warriors, but you're talking 2,000 years plus removed. It'd be neat to see what they actually looked like and how capable or competent they really were.
But the DNA is still very much in us. I truly believe that. That never leaves us. That's embedded from generation to generation. And my go-to is obviously the 300 Leonidas, the Spartans. But I think there's just so much more to us than that sort of. Being bred for to go into combat, and there's a different element, there's a different side to us that I've only learnt since I've left the military, that that can make us such a unique individual, that can make us such a force to be reckoned with when you merge the two together. And that's why I mentioned the politics, between the politics and the military sort of merging together. But I think the DNA sort of from those days are still very much ingrained in us, because that was one side when I was in the military, and I'm sure you're the same. That it was just that that Spartan side to me. It was just that that Leonidas side to me. Well, just with my muckers, and all I wanted to do, I was trained, and all I wanted to do was to get on that battlefield. So that's definitely something that. Probably a couple of years ago, I'd have jumped straight into the Spartans.
I mean, I was the same way. I paid very little attention to politics, when I was in, and was pretty singularly focused on the job, which I think you kind of have to be. But speaking of politics, the difference between the UK and the United States politically, while there's certainly parallels, there's also some pretty stark contrasts. From your time in the military and kind of keeping track since you've been out, do you see a kind of a heavy resistance from the military, not outwardly so, but kind of amongst the guys, like a frustration with Parliament or the political structure of the UK and being frustrated with them and wishing that they would do things different? Is there that same kind of dissonance almost?
At this current time, right now, yes.
Yeah.
You know, they're waking up a bit more, i.e. they're a bit more politically savvy, if that makes sense. So back in my day, and I say back in my day, you know, from 97 to, or when did I leave? 2012, you know, we swore allegiance to the country and to the Queen. Back then it's the Queen, you know, God rest her soul. But, you know, we were just machines, you know, hardened machines. The political realm was so far detached from what we'd done. You know, it's two separate worlds. Where I think the political layover now into the military is so obvious and so evident, and that's seeped in quite deep into even the top tier of the military. You know, the SPS, the SAS, that tier one structure. Politics is seeped in pretty deep. So there's a different type of special forces operator. You know, they're more politically savvy. They're more, you know, they've got that business acumen about them because of what's seeping in from the outside. So I would say now, definitely, you know, you talk about Ukraine. Do they want to get? No, they don't want to go and fight a foreign war. Do they want to go to Iraq? No, they don't want to go and fight a foreign war. Two also, and I said, well, three there, is over the years, over the past 2 decades, our military's just been slowly, you know, diminishing, getting less and less, and the numbers, I think, have more or less been cut in half.
Oh wow!
Of what our fighting force used to be.
It's that drastic.
So yeah, it's that drastic. I'd say at least a good 40% of what it used to be back in the mid to late 90s. Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely an element of people going, hold on a minute. You know, I'm not going to go and fight for that guy who's just said that. I'm not going to go and fight for this guy who I don't agree with his political views or this sort of political party that's in power that I don't agree with. But then there's an element of, right, you sign the dotted line, you know, keep your mouth shut and go and do what you got to do. I think that era is over.
Wow. That seems kind of depressing, disappointing a little bit, you think?
Oh, it is depressing. You can feel the depression within, you know, not only the country, but within the MOD.
Yeah.
And of course, you've got your motivated individuals. You've got your soldiers just love it. You know, that want to be in the mixer. They want to be at the height of any mission or any combat situation. That's always going to be there. That's spread into the Brits, and especially into our special forces. But there is, it's sad to see. And I think there's actually a movement now in the UK where within the military, it's like, why are we doing this? You know, our borders aren't even secure. Yeah. So why do we think that we can go and secure other people's borders? It's got to that point, Mike, where the military are like, well, shouldn't we look after our own first and our own country before we go off and try and protect and secure others?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's I think a similar feeling or thought process here. You know, with this new administration, the border's pretty well shut down, which is nice. But you know, for the 4 previous years, it was pretty much fucking wide open. You know, and similarly, it was like, what are we worried about anywhere else when we can't even police our own? You know, I am curious. Like, if you look at the current crop of 17, 18-year-old young men in the UK, do you think that the caliber of individual now compared to when you were that age coming in is less?
The caliber, it depends. Physical caliber, yes. You know, when I look back at everything that I'd done from my Royal Marine training to P Company, which is the power training, to selection, you know, we were just hardened individuals. Yeah. You know, we did have that element of the thinking soldier, but it was just rough. It was tough. You'd just be going through so many pain barriers. And as you know, you'd have your house on your back. You'd have extreme weight, covering extreme distance, you know, expecting to function and operate in the field, 24/7 for weeks on end. And just, being just conditioned. conditioned to be a hard motherfucker. That, you know, no matter what comes at you, you're gonna suck it up. But now I've seen it because I've got a lot of people, a lot of my peers, that are still in, you know, are in very, very high positions now, and having constant comms with them. They're saying, you know, back then we were just hardened, but now they're actually, you know, we talk about the thinking soldier. You know, there's actually, with modern day warfare, the way that it is, with drones, with, you know, technology, with, you know, just the way, the layout of the land, pressing a button. I've been told and I've seen that, that there's a need for them. You know, there's a need for that, you know, sort of new generation of the 17, 18-year-olds who are a bit more tech savvy, who are a bit more, you know, smarter, but not as hardened. I think there's a great combination there, which, if trained, utilized and mentored in the right way, will actually supersede who we were and what we became. So I'm hopeful for them. However, I don't think there's enough of them.
And so if that 40% decrease, a lot of it is just lack of interest?
Lack of interest, budget cuts, area of operations now, you know, since people joined, you know, in the early 2000s because they knew they were going either to Iraq, obviously then later on came Afghanistan. And it's strange because a lot of people joined for that. And you find that a lot of people now don't join because there isn't that element of, you know, being out and about and getting out on ops. And why would you want to join when you've got Iraq and Afghan vets, you know, now that, you know, these big burly men that have done multiple tours, and, you know, you join as the duty sprog, and you're going to get your ass handed to you every single day with zero chance of going on ops. It's like, why would you do it?
Yeah, that's fascinating. Politically speaking, where kind of the UK is now versus at the height of your military service, does it seem collectively that it's gone further and further to the left, and they're kind of softer and, you know, more, I guess, not anti-military, but just kind of at odds with that type of individual?
Yeah, definitely. And the reason that is because, as I mentioned before, politics has breached the military. Normally, the military world was completely separate to Civvy Street or society. You know, the Crown could only prosecute the Crown, and they were kept very much, you know, separate. And as you've seen over the years, you know, the media, the mainstream media, have started reporting on incidents that happened within the Crown, within the military, and how that's been allowed to happen is beyond me. To how that's managed to sort of bleed in or breach into the military world is beyond me. And 3, how the military world have had to sort of bend over and go, right, actually, you know, we're going to have to adhere to some of these external rules and regulations in order to progress with the current government or the political landscape that's there. So that's, for me, there was a period where that happened, where you couldn't do anything in the military. You know, there's a period that I was in, there was like zero tolerance to violence. If you went out in town and got into a fight, you were gone. If you know, it got really, really bad. You know, even in the training, where recruits would, you know, show certain cards if they felt like that they were being, you know, really, really torn apart, or they could literally call the instructors out. And it's got to a point where, whoa, I think the tables have turned a little bit now. And don't quote me on that. I think they have. But yeah, there's been a huge shift, and it almost feels like it happened overnight. Almost feels like that 1 minute we were there and we were just doing what we needed to do and got the job done, and whatever we'd done outside of operations and of you know, of combat tours, you know, we could get away with. Of course we're going to go out and cause a bit of trouble. Of course we're not going to, you know, blend in with society or in Civvy Street. You know, we're going to, you know, there's 2 different worlds, 2 different rules. But when we had to adhere to their rules and regulations, we knew there was a problem, and we could even tell by the hierarchy the way that they acted. We're like, dude, when you were a sergeant, you were cool, you were chilled, you were probably the worst guy, to mess up and get in trouble. But now you're in this position, you're acting like,
Like a hypocrite.
and you almost felt like that. But then, we didn't realize at the time, but there was this huge sort of influx of political sort of correctness that was seeping in from the very top.
Yeah. Do you get a sense that kind of collectively the civilian society within the UK, generally speaking, I'm sure there's exceptions, but that they have a high level of respect for military service members? Like, is that, because here it's, I'd say most people are really supportive of veterans, even people who are left-leaning and maybe very anti-war or whatever, still kind of separate the government's policies versus the people who volunteer to serve. And even if they maybe don't believe that, they'll kind of publicly vocalize that they support the troops, or that that they can make that distinction. Do you find it's kind of the same way in the UK, or is it less that way? Not so much.
Here in the USA, the level of respect, and rightly so, that serving military get, but even veterans get, is off the chain. It is exactly how you would expect anyone to treat anyone that served their country or is serving their country. Wow. Whilst everyone can sleep under their sort of blankets of freedom, whilst we go out and into the deep dark corners of the world to prevent our shores from being breached. I love it here. I love it here in the States, because everyone, thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. It's, go ahead. You go ahead, sir. And I'm like, wow, in the UK, it's not like that whatsoever.
Really?
It's the complete opposite. I'm not saying about true Brits. If you've got true British blood, and you're a patriot, and then yes, but however, you can't be seen to be like that, because then you're classed as as far right, as it's a real bizarre layout of the land in the UK, especially at the moment. But I've had on my social media, I've had people saying, what was it like to go to kill children? What was it like to kill women? What was it like to to kill innocent people? And I'm like, wow. I literally left the military, defended our shores by taking the fight abroad, and these are the types of comments that I get. It's sad to see, but that's an island mentality. I think that's just the UK in general, but it's getting better, and I can see a sort of a shift in the tide a little bit. But there was times that you couldn't walk on the streets in your uniform. We were told not to wear our uniform outside of our barracks.
I mean, so it sounds like the way the United States was at the height of the Vietnam War, where it was a ton of anti-war protests and getting spit on, and same kind of thing. It was like a lot of active duty service members wouldn't wear their uniforms out in town for that reason. So it's still kind of that way there, huh?
But how backwards is that?
Yeah.
To think that in the UK, we tip up to petrol stations in our uniform just off camp, and you'd walk in and they wouldn't serve you.
Wow.
They'd be like, no, we're not serving, we're not serving murderers. We're not it literally that bad.
Yeah.
And it's just not a good place to be in the UK at the moment. It's something that needs to be worked on, and it's that shift from being patriotic and and being proud of where you come from, and proud of what you've done, and proud that you've served your country. And it's that shift of being pushed from that far right, which they label us as far right. It's being pushed back into the centre where we belong. But it's it's a sad state of affairs. But hopefully it's getting better, Mike.
What would you say the percentage of, when you mentioned like the true British blood kind of percentage of the population, what would you say that is?
We're dominant, we are dominant. There's probably, I would say, 75, 80%.
Wow.
However, it's it's not the mass, it's voices being heard.
Yeah.
That's what it is. You know, it's
they would say here, the vocal majority.
the vocal, yes,
Yeah.
exactly that.
Yeah.
And we're very tolerant in the UK, very tolerant. You know, we're very respectful. We're very polite. You know, we queue for everything. We say please and thank you. You know, we're very tolerant and we're very accepting. But once that gets taken advantage of, and then we start to voice our opinions, then all of a sudden we go against the narrative that's been brought in.
Yeah.
Of, you know, of acceptability, of inclusivity, of, you know, multiculturalism. And we're just expected to sort of sit back and take it all.
Yeah.
And there's a tipping point where you go, right, there's only so much tolerance that we can take before there's a takeover, or before we feel threatened that we can no longer be proud of our nation, be proud of ourselves, and be proud patriots.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of which, where are you originally from in the UK, and was it like that growing up?
No, it wasn't. I was born in 1980 in Portsmouth, so on the south coast of the UK. And it wasn't like that. No, it's only been like that for the last 20 odd years, I would say. Yeah, 2 decades where political parties have, you know, sort of allowed immigration to really be their priority, and the old inclusivity sort of narrative.
Yeah.
And it's only been the last few years that they've realised that's not working.
Yeah.
And,
so even growing up where in Portsmouth, it was, the military wasn't popular. Like if you said, hey, I'm going to join the military, that wasn't something families were proud of, or that people would say, oh, good for you.
No, Mike, I suppose it was. It wasn't something that was frowned upon, put it that way. It was, and I don't think it is frowned upon because, you know, there's a certain, you know, pride about joining the military. But back when I joined in the mid-90s, nothing was going on.
Yeah.
You know, you join the military to get a trade, or you join the military, no, I don't want to say to play soldiers, but, you know, to you know, because you read your Andy McNabb books and, you know, your SAS survival books, and, you know, it was something that you could, you know, you could have a roof over your head, you get paid a small paycheck, you get challenged on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I joined, is because I wanted to be self-sufficient. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet at such a young age. And I thought, what best to join the military? I got a roof over my head. I'm being fed 3 times a day. I'm being put through my paces. I was, you know, I loved a challenge as a youngster. I couldn't sit still. So it was something. And in Portsmouth as well, it's the HQ for the Royal Marines.
Oh, okay.
So it's sort of, you know, that environment was very military-esque.
Yeah.
So it didn't seem that way. It felt like it was a good thing to do, and people seemed proud of me that I'd done it. So I didn't feel it during my younger days in the military, shall we say.
Yeah. What was it like growing up there other than that? Did you play sports? Did you have a number of siblings? What was, like, how would you characterize your childhood?
Yeah, my childhood was good. So I was born in Portsmouth. I lived there till the age of 10, where I moved to France, but I used to bounce between Portsmouth and London. So my mother was from Portsmouth. So when I was born, I had 2 older siblings. They were both born in London. My father was from London, and my mother from Portsmouth. And then a year before I was born, my family moved out of London, North London, Wood Green, in Tottenham, down to Portsmouth, just to get out of it's changing quite a lot there.
Yeah.
It wasn't really the safest place to be. But I used to love it. You know, as a kid, you love the chaos of it all. You know, it's an adventure to you. So my parents moved down to Portsmouth, and a year later I was born. So for the first 10 years of my life, I used to bounce most weekends up to London to see my granddad, stay in London, go back down to Portsmouth. Had a good childhood, played a lot of sports. You know, I loved football, so Arsenal fan.
Yeah.
So played a lot of football, was very good at football, and just had a normal upbringing. You know, my parents at that stage had a council house.
What does that mean?
As in a house off the state.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, where you did back in the 80s and 90s, everyone sort of had a council house where you'd the government would give you a house and you'd have to pay for the bills and the rent, etc., etc. And then my father picked up quite a good job at IBM. My father was a computer engineer.
Oh, okay.
So from the ages of 3, about 2 till 4 actually, or 1 till 3, years that I can't remember, we moved to Australia. So I can remember just vivid memories of Australia. So then I had a sibling. My younger brother was born in Australia.
Oh, wow.
So we all were born all over the place, really.
Yeah.
And then we moved back to the UK, back to Portsmouth. And then when I was 10, everyone up and moved to France.
And did you spend the rest of your childhood in France?
Yeah, from when I joined the military at the age of 16.
Yeah.
So I'd done all my secondary sort of school, all my secondary education in France.
Was that a huge culture shock?
Yeah, huge.
Yeah. Did you speak French?
Huge. No, I didn't, but I learnt it very, very quick. So I come from a Catholic family. So when I was baptized and confirmed, I went to a French Catholic school. So, run by nuns. It was St. Joseph's, it was called, funny old thing. So, it was in rural France, nothing was going on there. We were the first English people to ever, be part of that village, to be part of that school.
Yeah.
So, we had to learn. We had no choice but to learn. I can remember.
Still speaking?
Yeah. Still speak, read, write. I speak fluently. Yeah. I've done 6 years there, so all my sort of secondary school was done in France. And within 4 months, I picked the language up because I was 10 years old. I was pushed into a school. No one spoke English, not even the teachers. You had the English teacher that spoke English, but not very well. Yeah. So it's bizarre because when you're engulfed in that environment and surrounded by that environment, you pick it up very, very quick. I didn't go out and learn. You think every night I'll be back learning. Just because I was surrounded by it 24/7, Monday to Friday at school, then obviously all my friends, etc., etc. Within 3 months, and I mean within 3 months, I could hold a decent conversation. I could understand what people were saying. And then over the months and the years, you pick up the accent, you learn to read and write, and it's amazing how adaptable you are,
especially
and how much you take in. Yeah.
Did you continue to play sports down there, and was your childhood relatively the same, or was it vastly different moving there?
No, it remained the same really. I played a lot of football. I went to a football school of excellence in France, and after 2 years of being at the Catholic school, I went and stayed at a boarding school for a further 2 years. Played soccer every night, football, however you want to call it. But I was just that sporty, active kid. I happened to be really good at soccer, football. Thought I found my niche there, and all I wanted to do was play football at a young age.
At what age did you decide that the military was for sure what you wanted to do, or was there a catalyst that kind of spawned you wanting to join, or was it more of maybe I'll give this a shot?
No, do you know what it was? There was a catalyst. My stepfather used to, he was a builder, so he used to renovate old houses in Normandy, in France, where we lived, and sell them to the English, so to the Brits, as holiday homes. And one of those holiday homes that he built up and renovated and sold was a major in the army. And every time he came over, I went over to help him with his gardening and with a few bits, just sort of bits and bobs around the house. And I got really, really friendly with him, really from the age of probably about 14.
Yeah.
And then he started talking to me about the military, about the army, and the discipline side of things, how I'd love jumping out of planes, etc., etc. And when I was 15, he took me back over to England, to his camp where he was staying. He was the commanding officer of the infantry regiment that he was in charge of. And I stayed with him for 2 weeks. Now, went on live firing exercises. Obviously, I didn't participate, but I was there watching all the soldiers. I can just remember, people loading up their magazines. I was like this, 9 stone wet, a scrawny 14-year-old kid, just thinking to myself, wow, I want to be like these dudes.
Yeah.
And he knew, this major knew exactly where to take me. He took me to all the live firing exercises. He took me into the field. He took me, he taught me field craft, all of the stuff outside of camp, because he knew from working with him that I was very active, that I was very, physical, and I was a fit lad.
Yeah.
So he sort of sold me the dream, shall we say.
Like a full-blown recruiter almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So at the earliest opportunity, so I actually signed my documentation to join the military at 16 and 11 months.
Oh, wow.
I joined just after my 17th birthday. And the earliest you can sign up is 16 and 10 months.
Wow.
So as soon as I could, I sort of was like, this is what I want to do. Yeah. And it was thanks to this major, really.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. And I joined the Royal Engineers at the age of 17, just turned 17.
Wow. Was there any pushback from your parents or family?
No, they were kicking me out the door. They were just,
they couldn't wait.
Yeah, go.
Yeah. Before we get into the military stuff, I was just curious, living in France and in the UK for most of your childhood, was there a specific childhood meal that's specific to those two areas that you liked the most?
There wasn't a specific meal. However, pasta and sweet corn.
Yeah.
When my parents moved out to France, we lived in caravans for about 6 months whilst our house was being renovated.
Full-blown gypsy, huh?
Full-blown gypsy, if you wish. Yeah. So I can just remember pasta and sweet corn every fucking night, to the point where you're just like that. You can't eat any more sweet corn. You can't eat any more pasta. And we had geese as well. So we sort of had a small farm. There was pigs. We had a cow. We had geese. And we used to eat geese eggs. And I don't know if you've ever eaten.
I don't think I have.
A goose egg. It's so strong and potent and... Oh, and at first you're like, you go from eating chicken's eggs to geese eggs, and I can just remember tasting my first goose egg, and I couldn't stomach it. I was like, when you dry reach, and they were like, make sure you eat everything that's on your plate. Part of that era, where it was like you don't get down from the table unless everything's gone from your plate. So I remember 2 geese eggs, pasta and sweet corn, and that was our lives for years and years. And it's funny because when my daughter absolutely loves pasta and butter, that's all she eats, and I feel like and we're not doing too bad for ourselves, and I feel like a right a right bad dad when I'm just feeding her pasta, thinking God, my mum and my stepdad used to do that. Because we were living on the breadline as such, trying to get the house finished, and we're living quite a good life, and you choose to eat that. So I don't feel as bad now for them.
Is there a traditional British meal that you like the most?
Yes, there is. I like a roast dinner. So I like my lamb roast. So you'll have lamb cooked to perfection, lovely gravy over it. Roast potatoes, normally cooked in duck fat, so it makes them nice and crispy on the outside, fluffy on the inside, and then Yorkshire pudding. Now Yorkshire pudding is sort of a pastry type food, which that is the roast dinner. If you have a roast dinner without a Yorkshire pudding, then it's not a roast dinner. So roast dinner I would say is my favourite, but also bangers and mash. Yeah, I like sausage and mash. And when you look back at sausage and mash and stew, to be fair, we had quite a lot of stew when I was young. They're all like ration meals. Yeah. When you think it's going into that sort of famine era, where it was mash the potatoes up, a couple of sausages in there that you get from the butchers. It was easy, but substantial meal to have.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the stew. Stew, you just have bits of carrot, bits of vegetables, in with a bit of meat if you were lucky.
Yeah.
There was 6 of us at home, six kids. So you can imagine when the stew came out, if you were the last to serve yourself, then or last to be served, you wouldn't have much meat. But roasting our bangers and mash, and I used to love a bit of stew and bread.
No beef Wellington.
Beef Wellington, it's that's an acquired taste, I think.
Really?
But I do like beef Wellington.
I love it.
I had a beef Wellington here, but it wasn't the same. They served me sort of beef medallions with a mushroom sort of topping, and the pastry on top.
Yeah, that's not.
And I'm like, no, you gotta encapsulate. It's got to be cooked in it. It's got to absorb all the goodness and all the mushrooms. But beef Wellington, no, I do love a beef Wellington, I have to admit. But back then that was only for the super rich.
I've had Gordon Ramsay's. I mean, at his restaurant here in the United States. But man, it's one of my favorite things to eat.
It is.
Yeah.
And I've got to admit, I have indulged a lot more in the beef Wellingtons now than I have with the bangers and mash and with the stew.
Yeah. Could you kind of synopsize joining the military and your path? Because you obviously did several different things, ultimately ending up at the very top. But can you kind of walk us through how that went down? Yeah,
so I joined the military at the age of 17, just turned 17, and I joined the Royal Engineers. The reason why I joined the Royal Engineers in 1998 is... signed in 97, joined in 98, beginning of 98. It was the 4th of Feb, I think, of 98. To get a trade. It was one of those that nothing was happening in the late 90s. You joined to get a trade, you joined to get your driving license, all your HGV licenses. So I joined the Royal Engineers, and then straight after I passed out of training. So when I passed out of training, I was awarded best recruit and best PT. So you can imagine my instructors were like, right, where do you want to go next? Whatever you want to do and wherever you want to go, we'll make happen. So there was 2 options for me that were pushed towards me. There was 5-9 Commando, which I went and done the Commando course and earned my Green Beret and my dagger, or 9 Parachute Squadron, Royal Engineers, where I went off and done P Company, went on my jumps course and earned my parachute wings. Now, 5-9, the commando side, always appealed to me. The Green Beret, carrying lots of weight on your back, big burly soldier. I love my field craft. But one of my main instructors was a para. He was from 9 Parachute Squadron. So he said, there's only one option for you here. It's 9 Parachute Squadron. Go and do P Company. Get your parachute wings, and you'll be in the best squadron in the Royal Engineers. Yeah. Which arguably it was that and 5-9 Commando. Between them there was the mutual respect, but the rivalry was, as you can imagine, intense. But the respect was certainly there, and I can just remember going. My first day of passed out of training, is my first unit that I went to. So what you do, I went to 9 Parachute Squadron, but you'd be completely separated from the squadron. So I'd still have my blue beret on, whilst everyone else was cutting around in their maroon berets, and there'd be a small block segregated off for those who wanted to go on to P Company. But what we'd have to do is a pre-aptitude to see if we've got what it takes to pass P Company to then go into 9 Parachute Squadron. However, 9 Parachute Squadron, who thought they were the best squadron and the elite of the Royal Engineers, their pre-para was hell.
Really?
It was run by 2 Lance Corporals. Yeah. It was, you got thrashed every single day of the week. Yeah. There's no respite at all. Twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day. And out of a group of 30 people that would come through, that would happen for about 4 to 6 weeks, the pre-power. You'd then get put up, about 2 or 3 of you would get put up to go and do P Company. because they knew that the 2 or 3 or 4 of you that got put up to do P Company would pass and uphold the standards. So every time someone went on P Company that came from the Royal Engineers, came from 9 Parachute Squadron, they were very well respected. They almost knew that they would pass because you'd have artillery, that wanted to be paras. You'd have signallers that wanted to be paras. So the engineers were, had a real kudos and a very high standard of whoever we send up to do P Company not only represents the Royal Engineers, but represents 9 Parachute Squadron and how we prepare our troops before they even get into the unit.
Yeah.
So I think I'd done 3 of those. I can just remember getting there. There's about 30 of us, and by the end of it, when 3 or 4 got sent up, there was 15, 16 different blokes, that obviously left and came in and come in, and I was sort of part of this small group of 2 or 3 of us that were just hanging in there. Yeah. This is what we wanted to do, and because I'd got best recruit and best PT, there was no way I wasn't hanging in there,
Yeah.
And I can just remember, thinking I've done enough this time, and then we're going, right, you're gonna have to do another one. So another 4 to 6 weeks, you're in that process for, but it's also a way of breaking you, of them going, right, you think you're good enough, you're not.
How much time between those 4 to 6 week periods?
Constant.
Oh, it's just back
It's
to
just
back.
a rotation because, as you can imagine, those that have done well during training, that have come straight out of training, or you can come from a unit as well. People used to serve 2, 3, 4 years in a normal Royal Engineer unit, and come on to the pre-para to get into night. So we had a mixture of lots of people, but there's a lot of people from training that would come, and then they'd just get, they just get fucked off pretty quick.
Yeah.
So they realised it wasn't for them, and they'd go to a Royal Engineer unit. So the turnaround of people was just constant, but there was a small tiny group of us that I almost knew that we got to a stage where they were playing mind games on us, and it was just a case of hanging in there, rather than going, right, I'm done. And it was brutal. I can remember as a young 17-year-old just bruised. My feet were blistered up. I had Bergen burns, so our Bergens are rucks, just so much weight in there. You'd run, should I just rub against your back, and your whole back was just blistered up. Just the skin torn off your back. I remember going back one weekend. We were given a weekend of leave, and I went back to my nan's house, who was still in Portsmouth, and I took my top off, and she started crying.
Oh wow!
Saying enough's enough. You've done enough of it. Just go. You've got your best recruit. You've got your best PT. Just go and do. Go and enjoy military life. I was like, I can't do that. I can't do that, Nan. I was like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
She was begging me, crying, because honestly, my back, it was just sore to touch, and it was just, the skin wasn't there. And what we used to do every morning, we used to tape each other's backs up all the way down, and especially at the bottom, where the bones are. Mm-hmm. That was just not down to the bone, but it was so sore that but you just conditioned yourself to it.
Yeah.
It was, I suppose, when I went on P Company. I remember going on P Company, and I pissed it. I was just like, right. And I didn't realise how conditioned I was to pain, to suffering, to knockbacks, to setbacks. And even though I didn't really enjoy my time, because there wasn't really much going on during my period in 9 Parachute Squadron, I didn't really enjoy my time there. I realised how much it conditioned me and what it took for me to really, build on top of that and get to where it gave me the great foundations for me to go, do you know what? I can do this. I'm capable of so much more. If P Company was this and I pissed it, then automatically in my head, the next goal for me is commandos. Yeah. I'm thinking about the Green Beret.
Yeah. And so how long did you do 9 Parachute Squadron until you ended up being in a position where you could try out for the commandos?
So you can do 3 years, and then you can I done just shy of 5.
Okay.
And then I transferred over to the Royal Marines.
Yeah.
So the Royal Marines are the commandos of the elite conventional forces.
Yeah.
So I didn't decide to go 5/9 commando, so be a commando engineer.
Yeah.
I sort of left the army and joined the Navy. So the Royal Marines itself come under the Navy. They're the elite conventional forces of the Royal Navy.
Is that an easy transfer, or is that a pain?
No.
Yeah.
So I had to leave. It was quicker for me to leave the army and re-enlist and rejoin the Navy, and then to go through the Royal Marine training. However, I could have stayed in the army and become an army commander. I could have gone 5/9 commando, but I was done with the Royal Engineers, and I thought to myself, I wanted to, at that stage, I had the Special Forces in mind.
Yeah.
So I thought, if I can leave, do something completely new, join the Royal Marines, which I know I think the Royal Marines make up, I think it's something like 60% of United Kingdom Special Forces, even a bit more, and that's the SAS and the SPS.
Yeah. Wow.
And once I got those stats, and I thought to myself, right, I've always wanted my green beret. Join the Royal Marines. And so that's what I've done. I left the army, joined the Navy, went straight into training in the Royal Marines. And as you can imagine, I'm going into training, I've got my parachute wings. Like, where the hell did you get them from? I'm like, I was done P Company, and they're like, so I got a lot of flack for having my wings, but I had to wear them because they're all military uniform. I was told straight away from the officer, you're going to have to wear your wings. Not only have you earned them, you're going to get a lot of shit going through Royal Marine training with your wings on, but you've earned them and they're part of your military attire, so you have to wear them. I wore them with pride, but on the flip side, you can imagine, you've got some Royal Marine command, your mountain leaders, your recce troop operators, your snipers, who have all got the same parachute wings as me, but they've got their dagger and their green beret. And they're like, wait, where the fuck did you get them from? Who the fuck do you think you are? And they knew that I couldn't take them off, or, and it just, but in a way, I was used to, catching that flack when I'd done pre-power with the Royal Engineers to get into 9 Parachute Squadron. So I could just brush it off, knowing that I was doing the Royal Marine course to then keep the momentum going to jump on, hopefully, Special Forces selection within 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Is that how long it took before you could do that?
So I passed out of training, and when I passed out of training at Limston Commando down in Devon, I passed out of training and I got the King's Badge, which is the overall best recruit with everything, from firearms to physical to psychological to the whole, sort of the whole package. The King's Badge is an honour that you're awarded, and when you go to your unit, it gives you a year's seniority over everyone else. So if you and me went and I got the King's Badge, I'd already have a year's seniority. So I picked up promotion very, very quickly. So I passed out, went straight to 40 Commando Royal Engineers, 40 Commando Royal Marines, and then within a year or within 18 months, I done my pre-aptitude for United Kingdom Special Forces process. So it's called a briefing course. You do a 2-week briefing course. It's about 60-70% failure rate to see if you're to get a pass to actually go on selection. So I done that within a year. So within a year, just between a year and a year and a half, I'd done the briefing course. A lot of people were like, "Ant, it's too soon for you." Normally people do 3 to 5 years at a unit. They get an operational tour under their belt. You're biting off more than you can chew. But that was in my head before I even went on Royal Marine training, or before I even went to Limston Commando to become a Royal Marine. So that was already, and no one could tell me that I wasn't doing anything different. And that's why I kept the momentum from Royal Marine training all the way through to when I got on selection, which was exactly 2 years. So I passed out of Royal Marine training and went to my first unit, 40 Commando, January 2006, and then I found myself on selection in January 2008. But within those 2 years at 40 Commando, I'd done an 8-week stint in Sierra Leone as a Lance Corporal on a short-term training team, training their troops in advanced jungle warfare, Sierra Leone Army, which they're a good bunch of guys. And then I conducted 4 months of a 6-month tour with the Royal Marines 40 Commando in Sangin, DC as section commander. So, and it was quite bizarre because I went out to Afghanistan. So I'd already done my briefing course. Amongst all of that, I'd done my briefing course, which gave me a 2-year window to go on selection. If I didn't go on selection within those 2 years, or 2 selections it was, or 2 years, then I'd have to do the briefing course again. And the briefing course was disgusting. It was something, it was in-house SBS briefing course. Like I said, it's got a 60-70% failure rate, 2 weeks, and it's just, it's horrendous. It's hardcore, really hard, real hardcore. Yeah. And it's a good indication. They say if you pass the briefing course, then you should piss the first 4 weeks of the actual selection process, which is the Brecon Beacons. Yeah. Extreme weight, extreme distance, time, over a certain amount of kilometers, etc., etc. So I'd had all that done and dusted, and I left for Afghanistan the beginning of September, and then knowing that I'd come back in the December and go straight on selection in the January. So
the hat on the coffee table sitting right in front of me belonged to Glen Doherty. It was a John Deere hat that I gave him. He had it when he tragically passed in Benghazi. BUBS Naturals is a tribute to Glen. They have collagen peptides, which I put into my morning routine every single morning, as well as the functional creamer / MCT oil that goes into it as well. They have hydrate or dielectric electrolyte drink mixes, which are great for pre-workout, during workout, and post-workout to get all the added sodium, potassium, magnesium, etc. that's required when you deplete it. BUBS is a family company. The way that they started is, again, super close to my heart, with him being one of my closest friends for a long time. And I encourage you to go to bubs.com, and now there's a landing page specifically for Mic Drop listeners. Just enter the code Mike, M-I-K-E, all caps, and you get 20% off your first purchase at bubsnaturals.com. So that's www.bubsnaturals.com/Mike. And you can check out the Mic Drop landing page and go support an amazing cause.
When I got out there, I got field promotion to section commander within 2 weeks. My troop stripey, troop sergeant, had to go back for an emergency. So my section commander got promotion to the troop stripey, the troop sergeant, and I stepped up. I got field promotion to section commander. So for 4 months of that tour that I was there in Sangin, DC, I was section commander, and I was really starting to enjoy it, starting to embrace it. And I said to my sergeant major, I said, I've got to get back, sir. I said, I've got to go back in December. I said, I've got selection in the January. And he said, Middleton, he said, I don't think you're going to make it back. He said, just to let you know, he said, who are we going to replace you with? And I sort of took it as a compliment. I was like, yeah, I get that. I said, but sir, if I don't go back, then I'm going to have to redo a briefing course again. And there's no way that I'm doing that. I said, I don't want to do that. This is my cut-off line. I have to do this selection. If not, I'm going to have to do the whole process again. Yeah. I said, I've worked so hard in these 2 years. I've done so much, packed so much in, that I need to be on this selection process. He said, I'll see what I can do, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I'm going about my normal day, and the Padre joins us on one of our patrols in Sangin, DC, 14-hour patrols. I'm using it as training as well. I'm carrying, a lot of weight. I'm section commander, so I have to lead by example. It's getting quite hairy out there as well. You know, it's staying in DC, in Op Herrick 7 was wasn't a nice place to be. Living in mud huts, you know, just doing what grunts do. You know, it's like we're going out, we're patrolling, we're gaining land, we're securing it. You know, our area of patrol was huge. And the Padre came along one day and he said, you know, we're there patrolling along. We're sat down having a bit of food. You know, arcs are being covered. He said, how's it going? You know, Middleton. I said, yeah, it's going well. So I said, I don't know if you could help me out, actually. I said, I'm trying. I don't want to sound like a welfare case. I said, I'm not trying to get home. I said, I'm trying to get home to get on selection. If anything, you know, I've got more pain and suffering waiting for me. He said, but I said, I'm trying to get home for, you know, to get on selection. I said, I've worked so hard for it. And just, you know, I feel that this is my time. I'm ready. And lo and behold, you know, the Padre got back, had a word with the Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major came up to me and went, yeah, do you know what, Middleton, you're right. We're going to get you off as soon as we can. It'll probably be late December. He said, when does the selection start? I said, the 6th of Jan. I said, but I want to go on the pre-hill phase because a lot of the lads get together and they, in their own time, go on what we call the pre-hills package. So we go on, you know, we try and figure out all the routes and, you know, just we walk them. So if that route does come up, you know, 1 in a 30 chance it comes up, then, you know, we're prepared for it. But you get your hill legs in. I said, I'd like to get on that. He went, okay, then I'll see what I can do. So he flew me back, and the hill package is 2 weeks long. He flew me back a week into the hills package. So I got back into Taunton, 40 Commando, where my wife had our firstborn. So my firstborn was born in September. I'd been home for 10 days and then went to Afghanistan. So my firstborn daughter didn't recognise, she didn't know who I was.
Wow.
So, but what I'd done, this is no word of a lie, I got back, it's how dedicated I was, how obsessed I was. I got back, ditched my kit, spent the night at home, kissed my wife goodbye, my daughter goodbye, and went on the last week of the Hills package that I didn't need to go on.
Wow.
But this nearly tripped me up as well. So I'm a week late and I go and see the instructor. I said, Middleton, I just got back from Afghanistan. That's why I'm late. But I want to just jump on the last week of the Hills. He was like, yeah, no problem at all. He said, what did you just say? You just got back from Afghanistan? I said, yeah. He said, how long do you do? But because I'd done over half the tour, he said, you're not allowed to be here, Middleton. He said, you need to go on R&R. He said, when did you got back? Yesterday. I said, yeah, yesterday. I said, I just dropped my stuff off at home. And he said, no, you're not allowed to be here. I said, just don't say anything. I said, because I've literally had this conversation with my Sergeant Major. You know, I've had real complications just trying to get out of Afghan. And now I'm here. I said, he said, but Ant, you're going to do these, you know, you're literally on selection in 2 weeks' time. I said, yeah, I know that. And he said, you're going to do a week of pre-hills, you're going to have a week off, then go on selection. I said, yeah. He said, well, listen, the one reason why I'm not going to say anything, he said, I cannot question your dedication and your commitment to what you're about to get involved in. And to be fair, it's with that attitude that we need people to go on selection with. He said, so I'm going to turn a blind eye to you even being here. So you can imagine, you know, everything was against me to really, you know, I felt like the gods were against me and that you know, something bad was going to happen to me on selection. So lo and behold, you know, I turn up 6th of Jan 2008, start the selection process, and you know, all I can say about the selection process is, you know, you have to be obsessed. You know, you can't have one distraction in your mind. Even though I just got back from Afghanistan, we'd had a pretty hairy tour. My newborn child was at home with my wife. I can remember just standing in the, we all had to cram into the galley. We called it the galley, the cookhouse, for our opening brief. And I remember just going into the cookhouse, and I was right at the back. So I stood at the back, and the cookhouse was quite big. There's 202 people in there. And the chief instructor comes out. He comes out and he's got his, you know, he's got his sandy beret on. He's got his blue stable belt. And then behind him, his instructors, SAS instructors, SPS instructors. SBS, green beret, green stable belts. SAS, sandy beret, blue stable belts. So chief instructors there, you've got SAS, SBS, SAS, SPS. They're the DS on selection. And the chief instructor, he points down to a table. And I'm on my tiptoes. I'm a short ass, right? So I'm on my tiptoes. You've got these mountains of men in front of me, you know, big geezers, you know, proper men. And I'm trying to look through, and he points at the table, and there's, you know, the people were sitting at first, and then towards the end, there's 20 rows of people standing. Like I said, 202 people squeezed into this room. He pointed at the table, and he said to one of the recruits, he said, "How many of you sat around this table?" And the guy goes, you know, he thinks it's a test. Right? He goes, 6 staff. And he goes, 6. And he shouts out, 6 people around this table. He said, that's how many of you there's going to be at the end of this 6-month process.
Wow.
And I can remember thinking to myself, looking at that table and thinking, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
I'm going to have one of those spots, one of those chairs belonged to me on that table.
Was that a close representation of how many guys made it through?
8 of us made it through.
Wow.
So yeah, it was, yeah. And
man, that's crazy.
It was insane. And but just that thought process, I'll never forget it. I was like, I'm going to be on this table. I've been through far too much shit. I've dedicated my whole life, really, you know, my whole sort of, you know, teens, late teens going into early adulthood, early 20s, to be sat on that table, and the dedication and sacrifice that I've made over the last 2 years of, well, it'd probably be nearly 3 years of whilst going through Royal Marine training. I deserve a place at that table.
Yeah, wow. Before we get into the actual selection and subsequent time with the SBS, you mentioned the Royal Marine tour in Afghanistan was pretty hairy. I know there seems, I mean, I had Dean Stott on last year.
Cool guy.
I
love Dean.
There seems to be a significant or at least noticeable disparity between what American special operations guys can and are willing to talk about mission detail-wise, and everybody I've ever heard speak about it from the UK. But is there anything that you can share from that deployment in terms of hairy operations that you were on, or any kind of just stories from that deployment that you can or are willing to share?
So I conducted 3 tours of Afghanistan.
Prior to?
1 in the Royal Marines,
okay,
and 2 in the Special Forces.
Yeah.
So the Royal Marine one I can talk about, and I can touch on certain things within my task force sort of missions that I'd done. But this was Op Herrick. So Op Herrick was the name of the operation. I was on Op Herrick 7 in the Royal Marines as section commander. And, you know, during that period, it was IED central. It was, you know, Op Bomber, i.e. you'd go out, you know, 2 ways in and out of a FOB. A FOB is a forward operational base for people that don't know what a FOB is. And, you know, there's two ways in and out. So what we had to do, which was our main job really, the patrolling was the patrolling. You know, we'd be reactive, we'd talk to villagers, we'd talk to, you know, elders. That was almost the easy part. You know, if we needed to if we got into a firefight, we knew what we needed to do. You know, we're well rehearsed in that. It was more keeping the camp safe. So, you know, that guard duty, the stag duty that you're on, you know, where you have to stay vigilant all the time because, you know, we had a heavy weapons team, you know, form at the top of the FOB, so they're on overwatch, if you wish. And then obviously certain corners of the compound were sangins, you know, where you'd protect the base. But it wasn't so much protecting the base; it was protecting the entry and exit points of where we would where we would patrol, because there's only so many, there's only so many patterns that we can do before the enemy click on and go, right, they're using this, they're using here, they're coming down here, they're either going across this field or they're going through the town, and because everything was boarded up at this stage, all the corrugated iron, none of the shops were open, it was desolate. We were in control of that location, of that area. And it was just that, just being so vigilant at night, but then, waking up and going out on a 14-hour patrol, where you knew that the first part of it was the most important part of the mission, was getting the fuck out of the fob, and talk about fucking passing the mine detector about. If that was like a fucking hot potato, it's like, you'll fucking go, it's your go, and you could see the fear in the lad's eyes, to a point where, as section commander, who was always one back, navigating, etc., I'd be like, let me fucking go up. No, Ant, no, let me go up. And I think the Afghan sort of territory, or the Afghan sort of era, changed how we bonded as soldiers. It changed how we saw hierarchical structures. It changed how, we spoke to our less superior. It really bonded units together, where back at camp, you jump into that whole, yes, sir, if he's a sergeant, but when they're on the ground, you're calling them by their first names. I think Afghan really changed that dynamic of the rank structure and how we bonded as the lads, rather than keeping it, keeping it so separate when you weren't in there. So
like more of a team.
Yeah, it was like, even when you got off, you got onto camp, and you knew the hierarchical structure, you knew how to respect it and what to call people. And I just found that it really bonded us together. But it was ID Central. I remember we were called out on a QRF, and to pick up a patrol that'd just been hit. The commanding officer in that patrol got hit, and he got blown into the four corners. It was in an alleyway, and he got blown into the four corners of this compound, to the point where we're literally picking up legs, a torso, arms, and a head. And I can remember being part of that QRF and bringing body parts back to the stretcher. And as and the torso was just on the stretcher. And when you go through training and you go through all these scenarios, you imagine, putting a full body on a stretcher. It might be missing an arm, or it might be missing a leg, and, you learn how to put a tourniquet on, and you learn how to, stop the bleeding and to stabilize a casualty so you can get them back into the HQ so they can get flown off. But, when I think about the training that we had, we never prepared ourselves for picking up limbs. Make sure you pick up, the first thing was, we need to identify every single part of this soldier. We need to bring all the legs, arms back, and, it was literally that bad. Yeah. He stood on it. And I can remember putting the head on the torso. The torso was on the stretcher, big long stretcher as it was. Torso on it, arms and legs either side of the torso packed in, and the head put on top. And when we were packaging it up with a bivvy, with a poncho, the ponchos that you have, even when it was covered, it didn't look right. It just looked like a fucking parcel on a fucking stretcher. And it's not the body parts. Picking up the body parts wasn't the thing, but it was just weird, because we got this stretcher, and for years and years and years, carrying a stretcher, fucking stretcher races, and having mannequins on there. It's just you're so used to a full body on there, and that's the one thing from that patrol on that IED strike that really stuck in my head. Yeah. It wasn't going to retrieve the body. It was this. It doesn't fucking look right, and I can picture it in my head now. Just this square cube of body parts just put on this stretcher.
And that was that kind of the holy shit, this is real, kind of sobering moment that.
Yeah, it was, but it was also in that, you know, I don't like to admit it, but it was like, fuck yeah, this is what I do, even though, you know, it's, and again, being maybe selfish, and I'm just telling you the truth.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, this is what I fucking came here for.
Yeah.
You know, this is, yeah, it's fucking shit. You know, I didn't expect, you know, to come back from tours. You know, it's like, you know, I'd always prepared myself psychologically, thinking to myself, sort of half preparing myself that we're not going to come back with everyone.
Yeah.
You know, so when it did happen, it actually sort of, I think it helped with the process, because, you know, I lost a lot of people over the 3 tours that we done. But on one hand, I remember thinking back, wow, this is fucking real. Like you said, shit hit, this is, you know, this is what we've joined up for. But on the other hand, thinking, right, it's fucking game on.
Yeah.
Right now, you know, this is what I've came to see. Believe it or not, this is what I've came to see. This is what I've came to do, and this is what, you know, and this is what now has given me the fuel and the fire to continue to do what I want to do.
Like from a mentality standpoint, was there any element of you or your guys, and it doesn't sound like it, but I'm just curious, that thought or felt like, hey, this isn't really our fight, this is the United States, why are we here? Or was it more, hey, here's an opportunity to get put in the game, let's fucking take it, and we're excited to do it? Was there a mix of that, or?
Do you know what? We were the alliance between the US and the UK, like our brothers. You know, everything that happened to you was a personal insult to us.
Yeah.
You know, and it felt that way.
Wow.
You know, it was you just give us a call. You know, you are bigger brothers. You give us a call, we'll be there to back you. Yeah. And it's vice versa. And this is, you know, we won't go into it now because we're in the you know, the military stage of my career. But, you know, just with what's happening between British and US politics, that fracture right now kills me. Yeah. It is I call it the biggest political military faux pas in modern day history. Just to see those tiny fractures between the UK and the US. But going back to listen, I'm there. We are high-fiving each other when we cross each other. You know, we are. You know, our alliance then. It wasn't even questionable. You know, it's just like when someone that, you know, you fight with your big brother, but then when someone, you know, or your little brother, when someone hurts him, or you know, you're fiercely protective.
Yeah.
That was the mentality.
Yeah.
You name it. Tell us where you want us. Tell us where we need to be at what time, and we'll be there.
Do you feel like it's still that way militarily and just not that way politically, or is there even a fracture that you see or think exists today in the military?
No, I think it's still like that military-wise. I truly believe it's like that.
Yeah.
I really do, because when everyone says, "Oh, the Americans are a bit too much, they're big," I'm like, no. Listen, and the first thing I say, if you work with the Americans, no, well, just shut the fuck up. You know, is I think in the military, but the political aspect of things is like, you know, you got all the woke shit that's going on nowadays. It's like, you know, the Americans would listen. A lot of people, you know, the Americans, you know, think they're the powers, they're just the bullies of the world. Yeah. And I'm like, well, you know, someone's got to fucking do it, and you know, we've had that alliance from day dot, and just to see a slight fracture externally, I have to admit, external from the military, because I don't feel like it's like that within the ranks, but external from the military, you know, with all the bullshit that's going on. That, to me, cut like a dagger.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting, I mean, because there's even that here in the United States. You know, the divide between the left and the right is so significant and really unlike anything I've ever seen. Now, granted, I'm a similar age to you, and it's not like I was paying really close attention to politics in the 80s and 90s, but it was just different. You know, even if they disagreed, it still felt like everybody was on the same team, and now it really doesn't. You know, I mean, there's... Like, even with what's going on right now, you know, we just dropped a bunch of ordnance on Iran, and I was actually watching it was like a parliament meeting or hearing or special session I don't know why it was on the news here, but it was, and there were, a bunch of British politicians. Some of them were very supportive, and others were saying this is bullshit, this is making the UK less safe and putting us in a bad position, and they were very against it. And yeah, it's just interesting to see the shift over the last, say, 10 years or so politically, that it's dividing further and further. But
but politics used to have the left here and the right here, and there used to be that crossover where they worked in. That's where they functioned. They functioned in the crossover. You'd either be centre left or centre right. But now politics is so divided that even if you agree with, even if the right agree with some of the left's policies, or the left agrees with some of the right's policies, they can't be seen to agree with it. So it's almost that the left is the enemy of the right and the right is the enemy of the left. Even if they do agree, they can't be seen, because then they'd be seen to turncoat. They'd be seen to be fraternizing with the enemy. That's how bad it's got. And when politics is like that, guess what? Society becomes like it. Because politics runs society. I don't care what people say, and they're so easily brainwashed that you have this sort of left against the right. If you don't sit on the left, you're extreme right. Well, if you don't sit on the right, you're woke. And the majority of people aren't like that. And majority of people are still very much in that centre. And they might have right views, they might have left views, they might have a bit of both. They might have conservative views. Like the majority of us do. I agree with. I'm like, and I agree with this, but because I'm ex-military and my views, some of my opinions are right of field, automatically, boom, the left push you're far right. And it's a shame to see that, and that's happening right now. But when I was serving and joined my first tour in 2007, that was never an issue. That was never at play.
It's a very gang-like mentality. It's, if you're not 100% on our side, then you're just obviously against us,
you're the enemy.
From a pre-selection special forces standpoint, the deployment in Afghanistan, did you guys get into some pretty hairy gunfights? And if so, what can you share about any of those instances? Because one thing I'm always fascinated by, having a lot of different veterans on the show, is the lack of communication from the higher ups to the guys on the ground as to why they're where they're at and kind of what the objective is. It'll be very, very minuscule or very on the ground without any kind of idea, more from a big picture standpoint, kind of what the goal of the deployment is. Did you find yourself in that same situation, and did you guys get into any pretty big gunfights?
Do you know what, Mike? Now that you mention it, and this is the first time that I've thought about it, I didn't even know what we were doing out there. I was just told to patrol a certain area and slowly start sort of gaining terrain and hearts and minds, to speak to villagers, to see if there's any Taliban in the area that are potentially looking at attacking us, or that are terrorizing the locals, as happened far too often. But ultimately, the mission objective was, I just felt like I was patrolling 14 hours a day, every single day. So now that I think of it, to do what, I'm not too sure, mate.
Well, see, I mean, to me, that's the same answer I get from everybody. Whether it's folks across the pond, all the different combat veterans I've had on, and not that the military or that foreign policy is the same as running a business, but there are a lot of the same things. And to me, no different than, every employee in a company should know what the goal of the owner or CEO or founder or whatever, that should be very clearly stated, and they should have an understanding of where we're trying to get to.
Agreed.
And there's never any of that. I mean, yes, ultimately, that's not going to change whether or not you do what you do on the ground. But I think, for every single soldier, Marine, et cetera, to understand, hey, here's why we're here, this is where our piece of the puzzle fits into the entire puzzle, and this is what we're trying to achieve, I think is important. It gives the guys on the ground who are giving their lives in some cases skin in the game. It makes them understand the importance of it, which is going to further drive the commitment and passion to do it, other than just, well, I want to come home not in a bag, and so, I'm going to, patrol smartly, soundly, whatever, and there's so little of that. I also think it speaks even further to the lack of our collective governments not really having a fucking plan as to what even winning looks like in that country, which is why we were there, which I had a guest on here fairly recently say it was a 20-year war, but it was 21-year wars. It wasn't a 20-year war because of that, as we never really had a clear objective as to what the goal was, other than like this immediate minutia of take that fucking hill or don't take it, or take this one, and that's all anybody knew. And I think that's a mistake.
Do you know what? You're exactly right. And however, when you mentioned the business aspect of things, and everyone should know each other's jobs, and in the Royal Marines, which is the elite of the conventional forces, it wasn't like that at all. It was like, this is your job. I tell you what to do, suck it up and do it. However, not jumping the gun, but when I passed selection and I went out for my second tour of Afghanistan as a Tier 1 operator in a Tier 1 unit, the mission objective was extremely clear, and each other's roles were extremely clear. The hierarchical structure was just non-existent. When you pass selection, you lose your rank automatically. You start from the very bottom as a trooper or a Marine. So say, for example, we went on selection together. You're a sergeant major, which happens. I'm a sergeant. We both passed. I passed selection before you, 2 years before you, or a year before you. You passed selection, but you are my sergeant major in the Royal Marines.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I've passed a year before you. I'm a year senior to you.
Yeah.
Because promotion is automatic in the special forces.
Yeah.
So it's a very good point and very, very valid, and it's clear as day now that you've mentioned it, because no one's ever asked me that question before, and I've never thought about it in those two aspects of right, why are we here? What are we doing? And I suppose that's the mentality of the conventional forces. They don't want you to know too much. They don't want you to know what you're doing, why you're here, what the overall goal is. Because then you start to think, right? And ultimately you're there, boots on the ground,
not to think.
Show of force, not to know nothing. And when I think about it as well, even as section commander, I got my orders from my troop stripey, from my troop sergeant. And he would say, Ant, this is where you're patrolling today. I want you to take your team here, go no further north than this. See this village on the west. Just that's your left of arc. Here's your right of arc. Go around, ascertain whether there's been any movement in the area, any messaging of hostiles, any messaging about attacks, and any messaging of village takeover. And whilst we're there, do you know what? Actually, push a click north, and we start edging into this area here. But the overall goal, now that you remember, what was it for? Just to take land and take land and take land. What are we going to do? Take the whole of Afghanistan? Yeah. However, when I came back and passed selection, and then went straight out to Afghanistan as point man in a Tier 1 team. Doing task force missions, HVTs, high value targets. Everything was so clear. Everything was broken down. And this is, I say it subconsciously now. Now I say it consciously because you've made it conscious for me. I say to people, the reason why I joined the Special Forces is because, I wanted to be part of a team. I wanted to know what you done, what my TL done, my team leader done. I wanted to know what my CO done. I wanted to know what the DEMS guy done. I wanted to know, but everyone did know.
Yeah.
We were all leaders in our own right. We were a group of individuals. We weren't a merged team of one dynamic approach. We were a group of individuals that brought their own uniqueness and their own skill set to the team, but knew that if you got hit, I could step up into your position. I knew exactly where I was going and what I was doing. If I got hit, someone could step into my position and know exactly what I was doing as point man and going through that door, etc., etc. And the overall goal and mission, and I'll rewind a little bit here. So after my first tour, which wasn't too kinetic, the firefights weren't too bad, but when we patrolled as Royal Marines, we took over from an infantry unit on my first tour in the Royal Marines. And when we rocked up in town, we rocked up Royal Marines, Green Berets. We built the tower in the middle of this fob. Overwatch, laws, anti-tank weapons. We had everything, and we'd hit the ground like Royal Marines. GPMGs, we had two GPMG gunners, 2 mini-me gunners in a patrol. Normally one GPMG gunner, 1 mini-me. We were going out, I'd have my SA-80, I'd have my pistol, I'd have I'd have a light anti-tank weapon. The show of force alone, you'd be stupid to want to pick a fight with us. I think there were one or two, but nothing that stands out, like a firefight, which normally in those situations happens from 200 meters away. Click off a couple of rounds, you follow up, they're gone.
How many of you are there when you're out patrolling, like in your section?
Four teams of 8.
4 teams of 8.
So 4 teams of 8 within the Royal Marines.
Yeah.
That was Bravo Company. I was in Bravo Company, Royal Marines. 4 teams of 8. So there'd be 32 of us on the ground.
Yeah. Okay.
And we'd either move, depends on the ground. We'd either move, arrowhead formation, linear formation, whatever it may be. We'd just change on the ground. But the difference between going from there, so like I said, once I managed to get out in December and go on selection, as soon as I passed selection, I got deployed to C Squadron, and within 2 weeks I found myself back out in Afghanistan.
Wow.
in a 4-man team,
In a totally different.
as point man,
Yeah.
in a totally fucking different capacity, different mindset, different role, different ways of operating, different rules of engagement, which I think is huge here.
Yeah.
To go from conventional forces to tier 1 SF. Because our Royal Marines and our paras are like the tier 2 forces, and then you'll have infantry units tier 3. If you had a tier system, but completely different ways of operating.
Yeah.
Which I thought when I passed selection as an elite conventional forces as a Royal Marine, it's just going to be the next step up. And I understand why they strip rank from you and you start from the very bottom, because it's a completely different world.
Yeah. As far as the selection goes, 202 started, 8 made it through. Obviously, there's only so much going into it of what to expect, et cetera, but kind of expectation versus reality, what surprised you the most and what didn't surprise you about going through selection?
Surprised me the most was the freedom of movement that we had in the jungle. And what I mean by the freedom of movement in the jungle is, patrolling, live ammunition, just pulling, just the DS, just pulling a break contact drill on us.
So
just in the middle of nowhere, just like you're knackered, and then all of a sudden you're firing over your mate's head. You're breaking contact in the jungle. You're going through, jungle that's just thick, and you're in Brunei.
Yeah.
And it's just thick, horrible jungle, and they're all they're watching for is weapon safety drills. How you conduct yourself with a weapon whilst tired, whilst off guard, whilst patrolling, in the which I class the most brutal environment in the world, which is the jungle, because everything out there is
trying to
kill you, one, and two, obstructing your view, and your direction of travel. So it's just like, right, every single element is against you. But that sort of, that's why I realised the whole build-up, why you have to do, you know, it used to be 5 to 7 years in an infantry unit, why you need to have a tour of duty under your belt, why you need to be recommended by your sergeant major, why, you know, why you need to do the pre-aptitude. You know, it all makes sense when you go on selection, because, you know, it's not rare and they don't like to talk about this, but because it's so real, you train for real. You know, people die quite often on selection, more than you'd think that they do, even though it's controlled in a certain manner. You know, when you're absolutely fucked, and you know, the jungle phase is 6 weeks long. 6, you know, and the final week, the final 10 days is, you know, is the final, they call it the final X, where you're just camp attacks, you know, break contact drills, again, taking over ridge lines, and it's relentless to a point where even you're questioning your drills and questioning if you've got your safety catch on, questioning how many rounds you've got left in your magazine, you know, because the steps that you've taken in the jungle, you'll know this, you know, just on your weapon. Right, we've gone fucking 10 meters. Well, if you look behind you and you don't know where you're going, you're going to get lost in the jungle. You know, the micro navigation that's required, the alertness that's required, you know, your weapon handling drills that's required. That is the epitome of soldiering. And that is the real phase of selection. So the first 4 weeks, you're just a number. First 4 weeks is in the Brecon Beacons. You carry extreme weight on your back over extreme distance. You're expected to navigate. I love navigation. So I was, you know, just obsessed with it. Obsessed. I had an obsessed mindset when I went in there. You can imagine, straight from, you know, Afghan, straight onto the pre-hills, straight onto selection. You know, I must have been, you know, when I think about the mindset that I was in, yeah, I was in this obsessed, that's all I wanted to do, that I lived and breathed it. And when I look back on it, you know, my newborn child wasn't even in my thought process. My wife wasn't even in my thought process. And I believe that's what it takes to get to that level. And that's what is needed to sustain and to function and to represent the country as a tier 1 operator.
So, I mean, ultimately, it sounds like what surprised you the most was really the level of trust that they had in you guys to make mistakes or not or whatever, but it was really kind of loosening the leash and just seeing if you fuck up or not. Was there anything that...
it's exactly that.
I guess I wouldn't phrase it or pose the question what didn't surprise you, but was there anything that was easier that you thought it would be or not as difficult as you were expecting? Did anything surprise you that way?
It's funny because the jungle phase, everyone is petrified of the jungle phase. You know, the hill phase gets rid of probably 70% of the course. You know, because you got...
Just don't make the standard.
Yeah, just don't make, you know, you miss a checkpoint. You know, you've got one strike and then you're gone. And that could be anything from attitude, not making a checkpoint, not holding your weapon correctly on the hills, both hands on the weapon. It could be anything. You know, one strike, done, next one you're gone. So for me, that was the main milestone. I thought to myself, right, you know, I've got to. I'm not the biggest of lads. You know, you've got some beasts that, you know, they're rocking and they're gone. You know, and you're running there, they're striding it out, and my legs are running away. You know, never thinking I'm going to fail, but I'm thinking, you know, sort of talk about, you know, preventing the seed of doubt in your head to think that you're going to make these checkpoints or whatever it may be. So when I passed the hill phase, I was almost looking forward to going into the jungle because that's what I love doing. I love soldiering. You know, I was a Royal Marine sniper, a counter-terrorist sniper, primary fires operator. I just loved being in the field, you know. So the jungle phase I actually really looked forward to, and I really enjoyed the jungle phase. And again, it got rid of so many people, the jungle phase, where people were just like, you know, the schoolhouse was on the top of this ridge. Just to get to the schoolhouse in the morning, you'd just be covered in mud. You know, talk about morale sapping from the very off. And people were just dropping like flies. And I really, really enjoyed the jungle phase, which surprised me because the horror stories that you hear from it. But I knew that one, that I loved soldiering, two, that I was quick. I was always far, hence why when I passed selection and I went straight to a squadron, I went straight out to Afghanistan as point man, which is unheard of. That was from my selection report.
Oh, okay.
This dude, you got to put him up front.
Yeah.
You know, whether because I'm stupid or what, but you know, but it's like you've got to put him up front. And I know why, because I was fast, I was fluid. Yeah. The way that I moved, the way that I functioned in that role really suited me. But the jungle surprised me from a standpoint of, wow, you know, this is the meat of selection. However, the best kept secret of selection is the R2I, the resistance to interrogation, and the escape and evasion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that, when you say best kept secret like that, you had no idea kind of what you were getting into beforehand, or you mean like afterwards nobody talks about it?
Both.
Both.
So what I mean by the best kept secret is this is where the thinking soldier comes out. This is where they go, you know. This isn't all about physical. You have to be the thinking soldier. Because the escape and evasion, you're on the run. I was on the run in the Highlands of Scotland for 5 days. You have to cover 30 miles a night.
Wow.
And then from, you know, it's a simulated corridor, 30 miles a night, or in a day, but they suggest that you move at night under the cover of darkness.
Yeah.
Even though some don't, you know, and we didn't always do that, you know, but because you had a full hunter force, you have a full unit hunter force after you, dogs, vehicles, you know, and they know the choke points, they know, you know, where you're going to navigate through, and but you meet an agent. There's a small window, so you have to get to a grid reference, and a window would be open between a specific time. It'd be open for an hour. So, for example, they go, right, you have to cover approximately between 4 to 6K an hour, and they'd be like that. Right, you need to. Be here. The window will be open from 1 till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, for example. Yeah. And they travel all through the night, all through the morning, or 10 to 11 in the morning, whatever it may be. You know, you might not get there at 10, you might get there at 10:45, but at least you've got that 15 minutes where you know that agent's going to be there. Because all the agent does, he might give you a slice of bread each, and they give you your next grid reference. It's a friendly force. You know, you're in a foreign land, you represent, you know. But don't forget, you know, you've got nothing on you. Now, what they do, they've changed it slightly to make it relevant to. They've simulated a helicopter crash in the team. So we're in a team. There's 5 of us in the team. Helicopter crash, simulate. They drop you off in the middle of the Highlands with your kit, your belt kit on, your weapons. And now you've got to make your way. You're deep behind enemy lines. You've got to make your way across the border.
Yeah.
So, and God, I tell you what, if there's any stage during selection that I wanted to quit, or no, that's the wrong word to say. Any stage during selection where I failed and I didn't make it, it wouldn't have bothered me doing that, because it was just like my feet were in tatters. You know, I've just come out of the jungle.
Yeah.
You know, this is the 3rd phase of selection now. My feet were in tatters. My body was in tatters. You know, it's just you're trying to cover this ground, and the Highlands, it's freezing cold in the Highlands. It's marshy. It's wet. You know that cold that gets into your bones, and you know just pushing through.
Yeah. Do guys quit? I mean, of that 202, were there people that actually quit?
Yeah, they just
a lot of them. Or?
Yeah, to get to the agent and they're like, I'm done.
Yeah. I mean, would you say percentage-wise, how many people quit versus fail during Special Forces selection?
Majority quit.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, because to me, it's kind of surprising. I mean, like the SEAL teams in particular, like, you know, because what you're talking about is more like SEAL Team 6 or Delta.
Yeah, correct.
Like, just to get to that point is so difficult that, you know, not many people quit then. I mean, it almost never happens, whereas like regular SEAL training, same, like most people that that don't make it quit, and it's 75, 80%. But it's surprising with as difficult as it is to get to that point that there's still that many people. That
Do you know what I'd say there? And it depends on what stage. The jungle stage, I'd say, because you get to the end of the jungle phase, you deservice all your kit, you deservice yourself. You have 2 days in the jungle just to recuperate. Then you fly back to the UK, and they don't tell you whether you've passed or failed until you get back to Hereford.
Wow.
And then you go into the chief instructor's office. He says, right, go out, take a right. You go out, take a right. You go into the auditorium. You're getting your brief for your next phase of selection. You go out the door, Sergeant Major, down the chief instructor's door, take a left. You go back to the accommodation, pack your kit, and away you go. So the jungle phase, I would say, is more pass and fail, but a hell of a lot of people quit in the jungle as well.
Yeah.
So it depends what phase, but I would say the only phase where people really fail, get a stand-up fail, is either the jungle phase or the escape and evasion phase.
Okay.
So, but yeah, people just, it's so relentless, Mike. This is a 6-month process, You hear the horror stories, there's a 5% pass rate. You're on the best selection in the world if there's a 10% pass rate, right? You know that, so, it's one of the, so that seed of doubt in your head as well.
Yeah. And,
I remember being in the jungle, and, you talk about blokes quitting. I was in the jungle, during the jungle phase, in my hammock at night. I get I've got everything done. Got my, grab bag ready. My compass on the grid for the ERV, the emergency rendezvous point. That if we get attacked at night, we make our way up to the ERV. And my boots are hung up under my hammock or in my Bergen to lie. And I've got my trainers on. Just everything good to go. Now, during the night, DS comes along, shakes me on the shoulder. I'm like, fuck off. He's like, it's Staff. I'm like, oh, sorry, Staff. He's like, show me your bearing on your compass. I'm like, fucking easy. Yeah, where's the ERV? On this bearing. Bearing is, I tell him the bearing anyway. I know the bearing off by heart. Bearing, blah 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 blah. 200 meters. It's like at the top of near the top of a ridge line, in an open space. Where there's a big tree trunk there. That's got a chunk out of the left hand, so whatever it may be. A description of the ERV. Right, put your compass away. Right, who's on sentry at the moment? Who's standing to? I was like, Mike's on sentry. I said, I'm on from this time to this time. All right, good. And then he undoes my sleeping bag in my hammock, all the way down. He says, pull your feet out. Now, I'm fucking flapping at this stage because I've got my trainers on, but I've got the heels of my trainers trodden down, so they're not fully on, right? So my heels are in tatters, right? So they're not fully on. I'm thinking I'll just air my feet whilst I'm in there. Just pull your feet out. Obviously, everyone must do it. Fucking pull my... I haven't got time to go like... when you go like that with your trainer or try... I'm fucked, so I'll just go, right, fucked. So pull my trainer out. He looks at it. He looks at the trainer. He's got his flashlight. He looks at the trainer. Fucking points his fucking white light right in my face, directly in my face. He's like that. So I'm like that. I can't even just see a silhouette. And he went, I'll talk to you in the morning, Middleton. That's what he said to me. I'll speak to you in the morning. So, and he fucks off.
Yeah.
All night, I'm fucking in my sleeping bag. I'll talk to you in the morning, Middleton. I'll talk to you in the morning. That's all I can hear in my fucking head. Yeah. So I wake up, I've had no sleep. Patrolling along, and I keep looking at the DS thinking, when's he going to talk to me? Nothing that day. Go to bed that night. I'll talk to you in the morning, Middleton. And I'm good to go. I'm good to go. But now that I know, he's never going to come and check me again. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because he just, because then I get it right. It's like, for a week, this is like, like I said, it's just 6 weeks in it. For a week, I was probably midway through. For a week, I'm just like, I might as well fucking quit. I'm done. right? This is in my head. I'm like, he's not going to come and talk to me. He's made his decision. I'm going to get all the way to the end, and he's going to give me a stand-up fail, which they do. You go into the office, stand-up fail, take a left. So this is what, and then I understand why people quit, right? Because how many people has he done that to? How many people has he caught off guard that probably hasn't got their, doesn't know their bearing, doesn't know the description of the ERV, doesn't know who's on sentry, doesn't know the rotor. You know, it's doesn't know how many, you know, as it clicks on 0. Where's your rifle? How many rounds you got in your rifle? Is it fully loaded? Is it, you know, it's so that seed of doubt, just for me having my heels out, I was thinking to myself, if I wasn't as psychologically robust as I am, then I understand why people VW and quit. So that, you know, just going on to just things like that is, and the best hidden secret, like going back to, is just, you know, being drained for 5 days, getting to the final RV, which is a double agent, and then getting thrown into the back of a wagon, and then being interrogated for 3 days.
Yeah. And is that the last phase of training?
No, then you go, but it's the last phase of what we call selection.
Okay.
But then you go on to continuation training, which again, you know, is a pass or fail. I've known people to fail the killing house, for example. Again, going back to weapon drills, going back to getting things wrong, going back to leaving a safety catch off. You know, you're in the killing house, you've got respirators on, you know, you kick your CQB.
Yeah.
If you want, you know, you're kicking doors down. You can't even hear what people are saying. You're fucking screaming, you're shouting, hold, you know, and you've got the shotgun, you're blowing the hinges off the doors, boom, boom, breaching the door. You know, not one mistake, you know, and you can imagine how many people ND do negligent with shotguns, because the safety catch is so, you know, all of a sudden he goes to put it up, off you go. You know, it's just it's one of those. That's, you know, so to get to the end of selection, let alone pass, you're walking on eggshells the whole fucking time.
Yeah.
The whole
Which just breaks
time.
a lot of people.
More than you can imagine, Mike. More than you can, and it's a relentless process. It's 6 months long.
Yeah.
To when you start to when you get badged.
Yeah. And so for the entire phase of selection, you have the hills navigation portion, the jungle, the survival of
escape and evasion, and resistance to interrogation.
And then the continuation training.
Yeah, which is the killing house, CQB drills, your squares parachute course, and your surveillance.
So it's basically 4 blocks of training, the 4th being kind of
the continue, and you're doing skills, and this is what's good about it as well. You're doing skills that are new to you,
right?
But you've expected to pick them up like that. You know, it's a case of pick this up. You know, we've never blown doors down with shotguns. We've never, but you're doing it every single fucking day for another 4 weeks.
Yeah,
every day, like morning, noon, and night. If I hear another shotgun, you know, and it just the drills, but you're living and breathing it, and it's because it's new to you as well. The continuation training I really loved. You know, I'm in my fucking black overalls. I've got my respirator on. I don't know who's who. You know, I'm just looking for hand signals. I'm trying to hear for communication. Yeah. You know, it's the excitement of learning something new during that continuation training is what really helped me through as well.
Yeah. Is there a substantial amount of food? Like, do they starve you guys, or do they feed you pretty well during the whole selection?
Only on certain parts or certain stages. So during the jungle phase, you have rations, 1 ration box a day. You know, that's it. You've got to, you know, use that to your advantage. On the hills, you can eat what you want. On the, you know, obviously escape and evasion, you're food deprived, sleep deprived. Yeah. And then I would say for the rest of it, no, you're pretty well fed, yeah.
And sleep wise, not a lot of sleep, or
sleep wise, normal military sleep. You go to bed, you're up at 5.
Yeah. And is it 7 days a week?
7 days a week, yeah.
So
no, it depends what phase. Tell a lie. Jungle phase, 7 days a week. Hill phase, you're meant to have weekends off, but the foot and mouth crisis hit while we had to stay on camp, and we actually brought a few exercises forward just to utilise that time, which was good. Jungle phase, escape and evasion speaks for itself. And then the continuation training. Even though you're working morning, noon, and night, you're sleeping in the barracks.
Yeah.
You're waking back up, breakfast, away you go again.
Yeah. And so I assume by the time you get to the continuation phase, you're whittled down to 8 guys or not much more than 8, right?
You're whittled down to
a pretty bare bones.
10 of you maybe.
Yeah. Once you actually make it, can you walk us through the kind of the mental thought process of you kind of realizing and it setting in that you actually made it through training?
Well, it was one of those where you get to the last day. It's the last day. They come in, they give you your beret to shape. So, but before, on my selection, the chief instructor came in, all stood by our beds, or sat on our beds. And he called one of the guys out. I said, come out. And we're thinking, it was an officer. So we're thinking, he's going to give him our berets. We have to shape them because the next day we're going to be presented with them, and a small sort of parade. Nothing big. It's just like, what we do up next? No bands or nothing. It's just a case of here you go. It's harder to keep than to earn. But called him out, and the next thing he's come in on the last day of selection. He's come in. He's in a flood of tears, and we're like, what's going on? He says, I've got a stand-up fail. He said, I've failed. And normally when people reach the end of selection, that isn't normally, how it works. Yeah. However, you can fail on character, you can fail on attitude, you can fail, they don't tell you why you failed. You just have to go, if you're going to re-attack selection again, which you can only do once after a fail, then you have to figure it out yourself. Mm-hmm. So we're like, why? And he said, obviously, I don't know, and at this point, I was thinking, oh my God, he's going to start pulling people out. Yeah. And then he came back in with the berets. He went, right, all of you. He went, Middleton, shape yours. Shape yours. Gave us all a beret apart from this poor lad who was still in tears. But even then, I just thought to myself, are they fucking with us? It's just, if everyone would have given a beret, then I would have gone, they're not. Yeah. But in your head, you're just thinking, we're still on selection. Yeah. Now, this could be a test. This could be...
Yeah, you shaped it wrong. You're out.
Yeah. But you don't know, right? Yeah. Because you're so hyped and excited at the same time. But no, when I actually got given, when I got told, no, you've passed, and I actually got given my beret and belt by Prince William and Prince Harry.
No shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
They happened to be there visiting.
Wow, that's amazing.
So
what do you think of those two?
He was one of the lads.
Yeah.
You put him in a sergeant's mess or an officer's mess with a few beers with the lads. He's one of he fits right in. He's one of them.
When I had Dean on, he mentioned if I may be remembering it incorrectly, but I thought that he mentioned that when you graduate, you can actually go SPS or SAS. You can kind of pick at that point. And he went, I think, from the Army to the SPS side. But
correct, yeah.
Did any of your guys do that, or did you kind of stay with what you'd planned on doing?
Do you know what? You have a plan when you go in, but I was very much the same. So Dean was 5'9", commando. Yeah. So Dean was Royal Engineers, 5'9" commando. What I spoke of, right. The engineer, the Royal Engineer. Para or the Royal Engineer Commando. So Dean was 5'9", I was 9 Squadron. Yeah. So that's why I got on really well with Dean. Yeah. When I came into the squadron. So pretty much like Dean. Yeah. When I passed, they were like, "Well, Ant, you're former 9 Squadron. Why don't you come over to Hereford?" And at that stage, you have a choice. Yeah. You can go, right, I want to join Hereford or want to join Paul being the SBS, Hereford being the SAS. And normally you just stay loyal to your cap badge. So the Royal Marines normally stay loyal to the Navy, because the SBS is the Navy Special Forces, the SAS is the Army Special Forces. So if you're in the Paras, which is the elite of the Army, elite conventional forces of the Army, you normally stay loyal to the Army and you go to the SAS. If you're in the Royal Marines, the elite conventional forces of the Royal Navy, then you'll stay loyal to the Royal Navy and you'll go to the SBS. However, you can, and it is done quite a lot, you can, go vice versa. Pretty much like Dean, got to the end and they were like, and the option's there. Your X9 squadron, you can come across to Hereford. But I stayed loyal to the Royal Marines and to the Navy, because that's where I felt like I thrived. I felt like that's where they pushed me in the right way. I felt like that's where I really matured, and I just felt like I had to stay loyal to the organisation that made me a better individual. And that was the Navy. So I went across. But no, Dean is correct. There's that sort of rivalry of well, come over. You've passed the joint selection process. So,
which is interesting, because that would be like there being, one selection process, and then at the end you can go to Delta or SEAL Team 6, which that's not the case. Obviously each of them have their own completely separate selections, and the Army has the operator training course, the Navy has a green team, but so it's interesting that, you guys all have the shared selection. I assume maybe just because of numbers, there's so few of you to begin with, that it wouldn't really make sense for each side to have its own thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. But the selection process used to be separate. So the SBS selection process used to be different to the SAS program, and it amalgamated in 2001. Just because we were pretty much doing the same thing. The SBS leads maritime, SAS leads on land, but the SAS were in Iraq, the SBS were in Afghanistan. It won't be long, Mike, until it's amalgamated and you haven't got a choice where you go. There'll be like you'll flick between the two. You watch it be a joint, even though it's a joint selection process, it will be a joint UK SF Tier 1 unit.
About how many between SBS and SAS at any given time active duty operators are there? Do you know?
Probably 120 in each. Maximum. And that's on a good full squadron day.
I'd love to talk about, for what you can, the time that you spent operationally afterwards, but because it's such an elite group, I assume with the internet and just social media and there being a lot less of kind of that cloak and secrecy the way that there used to be 20 years ago about Tier 1 special operations units. Like within the society of the UK, I assume that they revere you guys as being the best of the best, and that just by itself, the name and the reputation and whatever opens doors and kind of puts you in places that you wouldn't otherwise be. Is that an accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. To get that SF stamp is everything.
I mean, there's 240 of you total at any given time.
Operational at the very best. You're probably looking at fully operational. Less than 200. That stamp is
quite a bit.
Is huge. Huge.
And I mean, it sounds like, especially or even in your case, kind of almost inherently that sets you up for doing executive security and doing things for high net worth folks within the UK, and kind of immediately puts you into that class of people in a way.
Yeah, it does. And this is where I think the downfall of former operators sort of stems from. We're so much more than a security guard. We're so much more than a close protection officer. We're so much more than going into the circuit, the security circuit. But we have this comfort blanket of knowing that the security world could crumble and we'd always be at that top 1%.
Yeah.
We'd always be needed. So I think it's quite a safety blanket to leave the military and go into those higher tiers of the security industry, knowing that, you know, you're going to walk straight into a job, not a bad paycheck, but the business mindset that we have and the business acumen that we have, from people management to problem solving to loyalty to, you know, if you step outside of that, and this is why I think a lot of the younger generation, special forces generation, are succeeding, because we're daring to take a step outside of that. We're daring to go, right, actually, I'm not going to leave that foot in that pond. I'm going to completely take it out, and I'm going to go and find a new team, right? Yeah. Because I get a lot of people, and there's so many people that say to me, Ant, you can never reciprocate the bond that you find within your team in the military, can you? And I'm like, incorrect. I'm like, you absolutely can. I said, however, we daren't step outside of it. I said, the moment we leave the military, we keep our foot in there, we step into the security industry, we step into those, and they are high net worth jobs, and you know, sort of within that industry, but we're capable of so much more. And I've found that stepping completely out and not, you know, separating myself from that world, it's in my DNA. It's you know, it's what I know best. It's who I know, but using my skill set and taking a leap of faith, let's say, into business, you know, that military mindset I talk about, the mixture of having that elite mindset in the military world to having an elite mindset in the business world, you know, that mindset is no different. When you look at the physical side to it, yes, in the military it's do or die. You know, you're either going to come off that op or you're not. You know, you get it wrong, you're not going to be there. But in the business world, you talk about mindset and the way that they think. You lose that contract or that business collapses, then that's your world over as well. That affects your whole career. That's going to affect your family. You know, it can take you out just as much as being shot by a round or shot by a bullet. Yeah. So having taken that step into the business world and realizing that business, reaching a certain level of business, is all about what we do, in looking to your left and to your right, realizing who's there when the shit hits the fan. Yeah. When you're fucking being pinned down by fire, when you're in the fucking trenches and you look around and you just smile because you know your fucking oppo's there, smiling back at you because he loves this shit, right? And he's there and he's like, this is why we're here. The business world is not too dissimilar. I got involved in a business, lottery.com and sports.com, that were delisted from the NASDAQ. Yeah. And I got involved when they were delisted. The team, a great team, a couple of people, a couple of guys. But you know, when you get that gut feeling, that's the one thing that we do have over everyone, is the gut feeling of being on operations, knowing that someone's behind that door, knowing there's badness behind it, or knowing that there's not. You know, I always went with my gut, and I use that in Civvy Street as well. I use that in business now, is my gut feeling. And this company got delisted from the NASDAQ. You talk about not coming back. And I'm talking about the bond between people. And I got really friendly with the guy that decided to take on the mission to get this company re-enlisted, right? And he said to me, he said, "Ant, do you want to come on this journey with me?" I went, "I know nothing about business." He said, "I'll correct you there." He said, "Just the energy that you're bringing into this room, the ways that you've just spoken to me about what you used to do in the military, the mindset you have." He says, "I'm taking this. I'm in the trenches right now." He says, "All I need to do is like you said, look around and have the right people there. I've got a different way of thinking, a unique ingredient to bring to the table, where we can turn this company around." What a name as well. Lottery.com and sports.com, just the domains alone. Yeah. I was like, wow. But looking at a team and just having a gut instinct in this guy going, "I trust you." You know, and my gut rarely gets me into trouble, already gets me on. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do that. One, I'm going to invest. 2, I'm going to be by your side in that trenches. And 3, anything that you need from me, you know that you can go like this or like this, and I'll be there for you.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, wow, business, top end business isn't too dissimilar from the mindset that we have in the military. And what I loved about this, and we got it re-enlisted, which is unheard of, on the NASDAQ, fully compliant, S1 filed, fully good to go. But what I loved about that is being in the trenches with someone, having a overall goal, an overall purpose, a mission objective, which was to re-enlist this company, mission objective to capture or kill the HVT. So it was, and we're going to build this together. We're going to start in the trenches. We're not going to start up here, because you watch the people fall once we're up here. Yeah. We're going to start down there. And the reason why I mentioned that, Mike, is because you mentioned the business aspect of things. It's like that bond, that team that I had in the military when I was kicking those doors down, and when I was looking to my left and to my right, and I was smiling, even though the fucking world was against me and I didn't know if I was going to come out of this compound or not. It felt the same in here, and I have the bonds now moving forward. And this is one of the reasons why I'm in the States, is because we just managed to flip the company around, get it fully re-enlisted on the NASDAQ, S1 filed and fully compliant, to celebrate with the team.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's that's why these two merge together. Yeah. And this is what I say to anyone leaving the military. And I think you raise a really important point here, Mike, is we're not just weapons to be let out of an armory. We're so much more than that. Yes, we're going to fall back on our strengths. Yes, we're going to fall back on what we know best. Yes, we're going to fall back on who we know best. But if you take that foot out of that pond and you put that focus that you had in the military, had on selection, you had when you were going through SEAL team training, that you had when you were in Afghanistan or Iraq, wherever you served, if you have that focus and that obsession and that direction in a different skill set, you watch how far you can go. Yeah. And I like to think that I've broken the mold. We talk about getting headshots and getting flak. Yeah. I like to think I've broken the mold within that, because now, especially United Kingdom Special Forces, since I've came out and done this TV show and done my books and done my shows, and lots of other people have come out, put themselves on social media, gone out there, sold books, gone out there, put themselves on a pedestal, so they're all of a sudden in the limelight. They're not living in the shadows. Yeah. And this is what I say to people, go out there, try, if you've succeeded in something that's completely new to you, i.e. selection, the military, and you've reached the top, there's no reason why you can't do that elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, the principles between, especially special operations, I guess, operational workflow and entrepreneurship or business management, I mean, there are a lot of parallels for sure.
That's the mindset, Mike, is the mindset of of the two, how similar they are. Yeah. People go, oh, no, you're great at structuring a management plan. You're great at managing people. It's like, no. You're great at fucking different ideas. You're great at solving different problems and thinking about things in a different way, using your mind. Yeah. And it only takes for me to give you a little bit of information and for you to digest that and really go to town on it. Yeah. You'll thrive, mate. You'll go through, and this is what I try and tell, anyone coming out, like if it petrifies you and you think it's, you think you're out of your depth. I used to think, being a special forces operator, I was so far out of my depth, so far detached. I wouldn't even, when I joined the military, they were just legends to me. Yeah. They were just myths, and to think that I achieved what I set out to do, I now tackle life in the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so once you finish, you end up in Afghanistan 2 more times. Mm-hmm. Again, I know that there's some sensitivity as to what you can share, but for what you can and are willing to share, can you talk about your time there and any of the things that you did to whatever depth or level you're comfortable with?
Yeah, so when I passed, so I went from being on a conventional tour with the Royal Marines, patrolling hearts and minds, securing land, securing an area, to then grow on to passing selection and going straight out to Afghanistan again as point man in a tier 1 team. Now, I thought it was just going to be a level up, but it's completely different. You know, everyone's on first name terms. I need to know everyone's job. They need to know my job. I need to know what I need to do. Everyone's really, really chilled, you know, straight out to Afghan. Fucking hell, mate, you're in the thick of things. I'm not too bad. I've just got back from Afghanistan. How long ago? Just before selection. So I done Afghanistan. This was my year and a half. Afghanistan, selection, Afghanistan. Yeah. So my second tour in the SPS, we're conducting tier 1 operations. So we're going out at night only. You know, no daytime ops. It's at night only. We're going under the guise of the night, getting out before sunrise. You know, the classic sort of SF operation. We're hunting down high value targets. So, as you'll know, there was a network probably of about 25 to 30 people. At the time, Bin Laden being number 1. He was the main HVT. However, they're all high value targets. Any of these 30 on the network ping up, we're going after them. You know, we've got all the assets in the air. We're getting all the intel in. We're working with CIA. We're working with 5 and 6. That's MI5, MI6. We're working with other security intelligence services that I can't mention. So we're getting pretty good intel. You know, but the intel comes from the ground, comes from our eyes and ears. You know, that's where the real intel comes in. So we're cutting the head off the snake ultimately. So all of a sudden I've gone around from patrolling with my SA-80 to now I've got a Heckler & Koch 417, the 7.62 variant, you know, because, you know, it depends on the caliber of the HVT to the caliber of the rifle, as the Navy SEALs say. I used to love that. We're working very, very closely with the Navy SEALs. We're working very closely with Dev Group. You know, we're getting we're adapting our drills and skills with them. Now we get all of our modern day drills and skills, you know, all of that, you know, going straight into the thing, you know, fighting from the door, fighting from the windows. We're adapting that with the teams. Yeah. You know, that's what they specialize in. Let's go over there. Let's really find out how they're doing it, and let's adapt that. That's where we changed the layout of the land in Afghanistan, because every mission we weren't losing people. We were going on to target. We were the way that we were conducting our newly modified drills and skills, along with our American counterparts. We weren't losing people. You know, we were going in with mission success. 1 HVT knocked off, 2 HVT knocks off. You know, within that first tour, we knocked off 12 HVTs. Wow. 12 HVTs in that period of that 6-month operation. Now, what that does when you cut the head off the snake, people think twice before stepping into their shoes. So what we done, we went after and these HVTs, one might be a weapons facilitator, one might be a drugs facilitator, one might be the right-hand man of Bin Laden, one might be an IED facilitator. You know, they're on the network on purpose, and what they do, they rest over the border of Pakistan, they come in, reorganize their troops, and then they go back. And you know when they're in, and because something will happen, something drastic will happen. And what happened one day, and I'll just take you back to a small op, is a wheelbarrow bomb went off. So this is the caliber of what you're going up against. You know, farmers think they're farmers. There was this kid attached to the end of a wheelbarrow, obviously didn't know what was in the wheelbarrow, was told to go and push it, you know, through this patrol of Marines. Kid doesn't know what he's pushing. It's got all hay all over it, blah, blah, blah. Boom. Set the IED off. It's a wheelbarrow bomb. Goes off, kills multiple Marines. This is UK Marines. We are in country, obviously. We find out, we know we know this dude's in town. So we go to the network, all the assets. Lo and behold, he's we ping him, he's across the border, he's in Afghanistan. then we drop tools and we go after these people, and we go after them to the extent where, we put all the assets that we need up, and we do a quick 2-3 day fucking intel package on them, constantly in the ops room, planning, right, bang, 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 and we drop on them, and we go on kill or capture missions.
About how many, if you can say, of you operators are there when you're going on these
4
raids?
teams of 4.
Okay, so 16 total.
Yeah.
Did you ever work or utilize American air assets? Like, did you get TF-160 guys taking you places all the time?
All the time. So the first tour was very, very hard. I've gone from a Royal Marine, conventional tours, to a highly kinetic tier 1, nighttime, close border ops tour. It's completely different. So I come off this tour, and you can imagine, I call it the golden days, but everything that you joined up for, I've literally just done straight from passing selection. There was no settling in period for me.
Yeah.
So I come off this tour. None of the other 3 squadrons. I'm in C Squadron. None of the other squadrons know me. So I'll come off this tour and I'm cutting around like I'm the dude. So they go, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah.
So but no one can say shit. I'm point man. I've got you got some HVTs on your under your belt. And it's not about that, but they know that tour that you.
Yeah, you got your hands dirty.
Yeah, you've got your hands dirty. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So they can't. No one can say shit to me. So it's it was such a great tour. Then I'd do a full rotation, and within that rotation, you work with the. We went over to California, worked. Done a lot of sort of maritime stuff. Worked with Team 6 and Team 10. I think it was that we worked with as well. We're on standby for the UK counter-terrorism team. We're on standby for global counter-terrorism team. We hit a global counter-terrorism operation, where I find myself parachuting into the Indian Ocean, being picked up by a rib and going counter-piracy mission. And then before I know it, another tour of Afghanistan comes around. So another tour of Afghanistan comes around. 2 tours deep, one with the Royal Marines, one with the SPS, done black roll, full on, jumps, operational jumps, the counter-terrorism sort of mission ticked off. I've been in the fucking SBS for a year at this stage, or a year and a half, and then the second tour, and I've done all this already. And at this stage, I've trained as a forward air controller. So, next tour that I go into, which is my 3rd tour in total, my 2nd with the SBS, I'm a primary fires operator. So I control all the stacks in the sky. So I'll give you but I'll give the listeners and the viewers a sort of a down low on what a primary fires operator. So I was a team leader and a primary fires operator on a different task force mission, where we're functioning at night and in the day this time. So we're flickering from tier 1 operations to tier 2, if you wish, in the daytime. But we would done what the hell we wanted. Vehicle interdictions, they're called. So VIs, do vehicle interdictions. We just merged them together because we were getting a lot out of the vehicle interdictions. So talk about working with the Americans. I'm a primary fires operator, so I'm on the ground with the team, but I've got in one ear I've got the team, in the right ear I've got the whole stack. Now, what happens once we go on an operation? There's a restriction of airspace. Say the compound's here. There's a restriction of airspace around the compound, normally about 2 kilometres, and within that airspace, all the way to the sky, no one's allowed in that restriction of airspace, apart from if you've been signed in by myself, the primary fires operator. So to start off with, we've always have 2 Chinooks. 2 Chinooks on the ground. There are people carriers. There are QRF if we need anything. If we've got a casualty or we need to bring more troops in. Above that, a stack above that, we've got 2 Apaches, American dudes. I forget what squadron they're from, but I worked worked with them for 6 months. But have guns will travel. That was their motto, right? Yeah. They gave me a hoodie and signed a hoodie for me, and have guns will travel. Yeah. So you have the two Chinooks, which come from the RAF in the UK. Two Chinooks, 2 Apaches, that American, and they're just with us. They're not allowed to go anywhere else. It's not like anyone can borrow them. Yeah. They're assigned to us. Above that, you'll normally have an I-Star platform, which keeps an eye on the compound. Above that, you'll have a gunship. Now, the gunship, Americans, I love the gunships. The gunships back in my day were hammerhead call signs. So any hammerhead call signs were gunship. Yeah. So what you'd have outside of this ROS, if there was a tick anywhere else, with conventional forces or whatever it may be, when any sort of American, and the Americans were really good at this, especially the gunships, when they were coming past and they'd have to go around our restriction of airspace, they'd just fucking hover around waiting for me to fucking call them in. Yeah. Right? So they'd go, permission to enter, not now, we don't need you at the moment, and it might kick off, and I'd call in the hammerhead call signs. Now, what I love about the hammerhead call signs is it's a C-130 with a fucking artillery piece on the back. Yeah. It's and obviously run by Americans, but within their crew on the gunship is a forward air controller. So what I can do when I used to bring in the hammerhead call signs, the gunships, I used to hand over my ROS, my airspace, to the forward air controller on the gunship, who could then run the whole ROS. So I'd hand it over. Say we got into a firefight, I'd literally hand over my ROS to the gunships for him to, coordinate everything. Yeah. Whilst I'd be in the thick of things, because it's very hard to coordinate at the same time because we were, jack of all trades. Yeah. So the hammerhead call signs were just an asset that I used to the best of my advantage. I used to love the hammerhead call. I'd have 2 in my fucking ROS. I'd have 2 in my you'd have a ceiling where the Chinooks could go up to. We'd have a ceiling where the Chinooks, where the Apache could go up to, at an I-Star platform, maybe a Sea King with a firearms sort of asset, a fires platform on there, but also a surveillance platform that could tell us what's going on within the compound. And then above that, I'd have the gunship. Above that, I'd have the Predator or Reaper, and above that, I'd have the fixed winged asset. Yeah. So my stat used to be fucking 6-7 high. Yeah. But the Americans, honestly, with their Apaches, they were just such a pleasure to work with. Yeah. 2 Apaches at all times. And you talk to these dudes, just like I'm talking to you. Everyone thinks, yeah, you've got your odd, your clear hots and your certain, trigger sort of keywords that you'd use, but we just talk like we were talking. That was the difference between the conventional fighting forces. Like, yeah, hey, this is. So I was a Mayhem call sign, so I was Mayhem 5-1. Yeah. So I'm on the ground. I'm Mayhem 5-1. You got the hammerhead call signs. Mayhem 5-1. Hammerhead so and so. Right, dude. Once we come off this compound, this is what they'd be like. Hey, Mayhem. When you come off the compound, are we cleared to let some rockets go? And I'm like, yeah, mate, listen. If you see any, that's how I used to talk to them, mate. If you see any, anything that's any badness that's going on, that compound is cleared. Listen, I haven't got eyes on. You're cleared hot. Yeah. Boom. There was just a great relationship between us. We just knew each other, and handing the ROS over as well to the gunships sometimes was a breath of fresh air, because you'd have a different sort of chain of command in there. And if we had Mirages as a fixed-winged asset, for example, who were French, I love to let everyone know that the Brits and the Americans were in control. Yeah. We are in control of this shit. I've got my American brothers waiting, hovering around the restriction of airspace, right? This was on my 3rd tour in total. Just to have that connection and the way that we functioned and worked with the Americans. That's why, it saddens me, and it's like a dagger to the heart to think that there's any fraction, between us and between the UK and the Americans, whether it's political, whether it's military, because I know what we're like when we work together.
I agree. I think,
and we're phenomenal force when we're unstoppable.
yeah, no, I agree. I do think some of it is almost manufactured or out of not boredom, but just like a period of so long to where you can do it. I have no doubt that if there was a legitimate shared enemy where, you know, we were on the same side, the same way like post 9/11 or whatever, you know, something happened where we found ourselves working together operationally at that level again, like it would go right back to being that same way. I have no doubt.
Yeah,
you know,
100%. But what hit me is when President Trump hit Iran, the nuclear assets that they have, or bunkers, and rightly so. I would say rightly so. Didn't inform the UK of it. You know, didn't. That just goes to show the level of disconnect there is at this specific time in place.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd make President Trump right. I wouldn't tell fucking Keir Starmer. He's fucking useless. He's got no leadership skills. The Labour government, you know, called him a bloody Nazi and a member of the KK. You know, I would brush them aside as well because we've got no backbone at the moment. I hate to say it. Yeah. We've got no back. Yes, we've got a good military, but we're understaffed. We've got no backbone when it comes to our political leadership. So, but it saddens me that that connection and that relationship of, hey, bro, I'm just going in to do this. Just to let you know, because you got our back, yeah? You're happy with that, but for him to not even, Keir Starmer found out when I found out on X. I looked on X literally, and it was like 2 minutes ago, and President Trump posted something, and I guarantee you that's when the UK government found out, and that's what troubles me.
Yeah, it is sad to see. I agree. I mean, I remember, at the height of Iraq and Afghanistan, in the earlier phases of it, Bush and Blair, like they were like fucking brothers. I mean, like to see just the brotherhood and camaraderie that those guys had, and how that trickled down to where the entire countries were really together in that same way was awesome. And I would love to always see it be that way.
But that's where you go back to, there seems to be a fucking period where stabbing in the back is evident now. It's like it just needs to just.
Do you see the UK, generally speaking, kind of coming full circle and going back to the more conservative, right wing kind of thing, or do you see it continuing to head the way it's going?
No, there's a huge sort of demand for it now. Brits have had enough. They're sick of seeing our shores being breached every single day. Call it an invasion, if you wish. If this was back in after World War II, you guarantee you that those boats would be shot out the water. So what makes it any different? Oh, what? Because they know that they're playing the system and that they're wearing all bright, life jackets and it's human rights. We're part of the
Churchill wouldn't have fucked around with it.
No, he wouldn't have fucked around with it, and it's because we're part of the European Convention of Human Rights. We are bound politically to an external platform, to an external human rights platform that if we do anything, then we're being part of Europe, even though we're not, but being part of the continent, that would be in breach of the human rights policies. So
I would have assumed that the whole Brexit thing would have mostly solved that.
That's what people thought, Mike, right? That's what people voted for. People voted for Brexit for immigration. No, let's call it what it is. There's no two words about it. Even I voted because I thought we got to get a grip on the immigration. However, yes, we pulled ourselves out of all the trades, etc., and a lot of other things politically behind the scenes, but we never pulled ourselves out of the ECHR.
I mean, surprisingly though, the pound is still incredibly strong. I mean, it's way stronger than the dollar. It's stronger than the euro. I mean, To me, it's kind of confusing, that because to me, like, again, not living there, not even having visited there, not being nearly as intimately familiar as the inner workings of the UK as you are, but that was my one concern, I guess, is like, fuck, that may make British currency plummet, and it didn't, so it's like it's a weird,
because we're so indoctrinated on paying tax. Everything is tax. So we are taxed on top of tax, and that's the moment that we keep paying our taxes and we keep giving our hard-earned cash to the government, then it's gonna keep the pound stable.
I feel like we're in a pissing contest with you guys taxes wise at this point.
You reckon? Not in Texas.
No, not in Texas. Well, but the bitch of it is kind of like the European Union being a part of it, is that the state taxes can only account for so much. So like, even though there's no state employment tax or income tax, our governor just signed a bill to get rid of capital gains tax, but again, that's just the state. The federal is still way bigger than any state tax is, and so like, yeah, it's better than nothing, but it's really the federal tax that just rakes everybody over the coals, and it's like just layers of it. It's like your income, but then when you buy something, then that's taxed, and the house you live in is taxed, and then if you die, it's taxed. If you give your shit to your kids, it's taxed. I mean, it's just like,
you look at road tax. You paid road tax.
Yeah, I mean, every time
to use the roads, but then there's tolls, and then you pay congestion charges,
and then
you pay
car
ULEZ, and then
I mean, it's just like, when the fuck does it end?
But this is where the UK is so tolerant.
Yeah.
Look at the revolution over, what is it, 3% tax. In the UK, just recently, they've upped the corporation tax from 20% to 25%, not 21%, not 21.5%, from 20% to 25% overnight. No one batted an eyelid at that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because we're so tolerant, and we're so that's why the pound is so stable, because we just go, yep, that's absolutely fine. And so many people, if you don't pay your taxes, or if it's like, well, you're so alienated. It's class. You might as well have committed murder, and people will think more of you.
Yeah.
It's such a thing in the UK where it's just like, well, everyone has to pay them. Just pay them.
Yeah.
That mentality has been indoctrinated into the Brits. That it's more. Yeah, it's seen more as a. What's the word I can put it? It's seen more. You see more as doing wrong, not paying your taxes, than you would if you took a life.
Wow.
It's insane.
Like it's made into that big of a
Yeah,
deal.
it's that ingrained and that indoctrinated into you. It's just,
and there's no limit to it. It's like, double it. No, it's fine. That's how it's supposed to be. And
double it. The French, for example, when they were going to bring in road tax, they pay tolls.
Yeah.
Every toll. When they were going to bring in road tax, they shut down the whole country.
Yeah.
All the farmers, protested, and that's the one good
Yeah.
thing the French, thing the good
like
of
dumping piles of horse
Yeah,
shit all over
yeah.
government buildings and stuff.
Yeah, so they went, okay, we won't do road tax. You're right, because you're already paying to use the roads, the tolls.
Yeah. Has that played a role in your decision to not live there anymore? Is that part of it? Yeah.
My decision not to live there, I've always said, and I've always been brought up with, if you don't agree with the laws of the land and you don't like the culture, then don't go there or don't live there. Now, the UK is cultureless. You're not allowed to fly your own flag. It's seen as racist. You're not allowed to be patriotic. You're not allowed to, you're not allowed to be proud of your military. It's in a real bad state of affairs, and I mean that. It's really, really, really bad. Yeah. So I can call it cultureless. People say it's a multicultural country, but where do the boundaries lie? With what culture? With what religion? Where do the limitations lie?
Yeah, I mean, because to me there's a contradiction, or there's a point at which it's kind of like everybody's a winner, like raising kids, where participation trophies and saying that everybody is a winner is also saying that nobody is.
Yeah.
And to me, multiculturalism at a certain point is that same way. If there's so many to where now there
There's
isn't
no culture.
any, yeah, I mean, like, because there's not enough of any one to actually
have a culture.
understand, or live in
Yeah.
what's going on. You've got almost in a weird way, it's more going back to almost the Stone Age of tribalism, where there's really small pockets of totally different things that are all fighting each other and not getting along. I mean, to me, you see some of that here too. I don't think it's nearly as drastic as it is in the UK. But
No, it is, mate. That you've got it. You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's exactly that. It's multicultural to the point where there's no culture.
Yeah.
Where it's tribal. This religion's fighting this religion. This gender type is fighting this gender type. It's exactly that, Mike.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I left, because they are fighting each other, and it's become so dangerous in the UK. There's a knife epidemic in London at the moment, where these big zombie knives are just in broad daylight. People are being stabbed, hacked up to pieces in broad daylight, in front of children, in front of businessmen, in front of families, in broad daylight, and there's nothing that can be done about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some pretty disturbing statistics too, where a lot of the refugees coming over are snatching teenage girls and doing just god awful things to them,
Grooming gangs.
and nothing's being done about it. I mean,
They can't. It's because of our government. They're so woke. We have a left Labour government that bury their head in the sand, and obviously they're just pure puppeteers. The strings are being pulled from
where do you think though? I mean, like,
just
do you think
there's
that-
an ulterior narrative of population control.
yeah,
that
I
sits
mean,
above them.
and I'm speaking from a place of seeing some of that here. The last administration leaving the border open, I think begs the question, like, if you're not so partisan to where you're blinded by it, to say, like, what possible motivation could you have for allowing that to happen, unless it's either somebody has fucking dirt on you and they're blackmailing you, or that there's some sort of bigger entity that's controlling that, which I don't know what the fuck it would be. But I would ask kind of the same, is do you know of, I mean, is it a foreign state influence that's trying to drive this? I mean, for somebody who's a patriotic Brighton, born and raised, and is now in a position of leadership and power, like, in what possible scenario could motivate somebody to allow their country to be degraded to that level? Like where's the motivation?
It goes a lot deeper and it's a lot more complicated, and the one thing I always do say is follow the money.
Yeah.
But
where's the money coming from?
follow the funding, follow the narrative, follow who owns. Why do the mainstream media give such a voice to such a minority? All these protests, they're all funded. There's the ulterior narrative. If you look at it, and if you had the world elites in a boardroom, the overall mission objective would be population control. But there, population control, that's the mission objective. Right, what comes off of that? Division, fucking fear. It's like there's so many different things. Blacks against whites, fucking gays against fucking trans, fucking straights against, Labour against fucking conservatives. It's all to control the population. And even, going back as far as, well, I say as far, it's not even that far away, it seems like, but, the pandemic, it's like, wow, talk about population control, whether that's too many people here or controlling, but that overall objective of population control, which has to be managed somehow, is being managed in the wrong way. And it's gone completely out of control. And also with the UK, 14 to 16 years ago, they started the immigration program, of inclusivity, being a multicultural country. That's what they wanted. But because it's gone so drastically wrong, and they've spent billions on it, they cannot be seen to say that it's a failure. So now they're in this hole that they can't get out of, and they're now going rogue. They're going out because they're in such that they can't go. We admit we got immigration. The immigration policy is wrong. We fucked up. Not only did we fuck up, but we spent billions, almost bankrupted the country. Food prices, gas prices, taxes through the roof, which you've suffered for the last nearly 20 years. We've got that wrong. Can you imagine a government that says that? They're done.
Yeah. Well, to me, the irony is that I think at this point, the people would actually respect that more than lying about it.
You got to take the tough pill, right?
Yeah, I mean, because to me, it's like staying in a marriage that's toxic because you've been married for so many years, and well, I'm Catholic, and I don't want to say that we got divorced. I mean, to me, it's that same kind of mentality. Like, it's just absurd. I'm curious. I mean, when you say follow the money, are you aware of any, whether it's state, government, or family, or any money trail entity that is influencing the UK in a negative way? Are you aware of where the money would go?
Yeah, well, I'm not aware of it. But when you think of the overall narrative and objective and who owns the media company, you could go into a whole rabbit hole about this, Mike. Who owns the media companies? Who's funding the protests? Where these narratives are coming from. You could look at a couple of top co's in the world.
Because I mean, here you have China, which to me would make the most sense, at least for the Biden administration, to in kind of a backdoor mechanism, grease the skids or bribe or whatever to degrade our society to make it less of a threat and an economic powerhouse towards China. And a way to do that would be to somehow incentivize government officials to leave the border open and water things down and make it dangerous, and drugs flowing in and society collapsing. And then you have Soros, which I don't know if he has any interest in the UK at all. And, but there's a lot of money trails leading back to him and his family of, funding protests and, civil unrest and shit like that. But again, I don't. But
you look at the East to the West, they're like chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
No, the West call the East, communists, they absolutely, it's a totalitarian state. It's, there's no democracy there. And why are they so different? Why is the East so different to how the West functions? So, there's definitely, I think there's definitely a layover there. But, do you know what I'm really concerned about, and what I want to do is the UK, because to see it the way it is, it's a sad state of affairs. Having served my country and my people, and my queen, back in the day. To see it the way it is and to see the direction that it's going in, all I can do now is focus on that. I see America have started to get their shit together, which is great, which is giving us hope and giving us an example to sort of, go towards or to adhere to. But right now it's like, right, how do we cut off from any external influence that is causing the UK to crumble in such a way?
Yeah.
So there's actually, I'm looking at actually running for mayor of London.
Oh shit.
In
Dude,
May
awesome,
2028.
That's
so
cool.
There's a huge
that's awesome.
There's a huge demand for it. I've got a huge backing from the public. I've actually got huge backing from the political sort of realm and from
That's cool. Shit.
a lot of hierarchical businesses in the UK. So it's time for change, mate.
Yeah,
it's time for change.
To me that's exciting and awesome. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to see that happen. I assume that should you decide to do that, you'd have to move back at a year or two before.
Correct.
Or
a year before.
Year before. Man, that's really cool. It makes me think, or it makes me curious, I guess, hearing about that and just some of the things we're talking about, kind of UK from a societal standpoint. My only exposure, and probably similar to the UK, if you're from the UK and you've never been to America, your only understanding is movies, or TV shows. So it's like The Gentleman or Snatch or or Mobland or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, like, as somebody who's from there, born and bred, and has been immersed in the culture, are there any shows or movies that are relatively accurate depictions of what the UK society is like, that they kind of nail it?
Yeah, do you know what? When you look at Snatch, that's sort of like the exaggerated, but the traveling community, they get a hard time. They're actually, a crucial part of British society.
Yeah.
They've always been here. And you leave them alone, they never cause any trouble. They get a bad name, they've got a bad stigma, but they're actually embedded in British culture.
Yeah.
So it's quite a good film to watch. And
have you seen The Gentleman by Guy Ritchie?
No, I haven't seen The Gentleman.
I'd love to get your take on that. I mean, to me, he makes a lot of really good stuff. I'm definitely a fan of most of.
Have you seen the film Green Street? It's about football hooliganism.
No, I haven't.
But it's about football hooliganism, but it's about how it's sort of left on the streets. Isn't it? It's not that it's fisticuffs.
I gotcha.
It's like, let's call it tribes. It's like Arsenal versus Tottenham. They all plan to meet. They kick the shit out of each other. There's that huge rivalry on the streets, blah, 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 blah. And once it's done, it's organised, but it's not organised as in crime where, knives and guns and nothing like that. It's a huge, fisticuffs and it's left, it's left there and then. To the point where, there's a story where I think it was Millwall, who's another London club, and someone else, where they clashed, and this guy he got absolutely kicked to fuck, and he was conscious but unconscious. He was stumbling around. He wasn't really with it. He was knocked down on his feet, if you wish.
Yeah.
And he's been separated from the group, and he stumbles into the Millwall end. All the groups are separated, and all the Millwall, and he stumbles into a Millwall pub. And he's there, and he's got the opposition. I can't remember what club it was. I think it was Millwall. He's got the opposition's jersey on, if you want to call it, or the football top. And they just, they just sit him down, and they buy him a drink, and he's got fucking broken nose, there's blood everywhere, he's like, and they go in and they buy him a beer, and he ends up drinking with him all night, and he's concussed, he's fucking, and then away they go, and they probably end up fighting, on the away match, in a couple of months' time. So Green Street is quite a good depiction of the football world, because football is everything in the UK. Soccer, right? It's absolutely everything. People give up their whole weekends for football. Their family comes second when it comes to football. I'm not saying I agree with that, but it's such a cult following. It's got such a cult following that if you want to get a good indication of what of what happens on the streets, or what happens, entertainment wise at weekend, then it's football. They're football mad.
Yeah, I mean, seeing that, I don't know if it's called Wrexham or not, but the Wrexham Club
Wrexham,
project where Ryan Reynolds.
That's it, Ryan Reynolds.
I mean, that gives, I think, good real insight into just how big of a deal it is to that town, and there's kind of mixed feelings of having Americans come in and whatever, but it's kind of a neat story. But you've seen Mobland, right? The show.
Yeah.
I mean, is
Is
that pure cinema, or is there
you could with Mobland you could it's not you won't say, oh, that's fictional film. It's quite I would say it's a good depiction of what you could expect.
Because I think there's this, at least from my observation of watching films that depict UK society, is that there's this almost kind of Illuminati-like old world money society that has the big castles on land that for generations, and it's almost like this secret society kind of thing. So that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of old money. There's a lot of private clubs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gentlemen clubs, as in right.
Yeah.
We'll have our meetings here, and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. There's a very old political, status still. British politics, even as outdated as it is, there's a lot of there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes there as well. So you've got that old money, you've got the lords, you've got that world that you think of when you think of old Great Britain. It's very much like that still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, being somebody with your background, I assume that or I guess I'm asking, like, and maybe you don't want to say, but like, have you gotten peeks into that world, being from a security standpoint? I imagine, because people like that would say, well, if I'm hiring somebody to run security, like I want an SAS, SPS guy. Have you been around any of that because of your background, or?
Yeah, absolutely. The underground world, if you wish, the higher echelons of the underground world have to work, with certain businesses, with certain, I would say political parties, but there's definitely a connection between the two. Yeah. Now I know organizations from the underground world that obviously they respect me enough to not get me involved, and I respect them enough to keep that line between us.
Right.
But now, if I hadn't joined the military, then I would probably very much be in that world, or I'm not saying doing whatever, but there's definitely a line there. But when you think of the word old school gentleman, think of these underground leaders. They're firm but fair. These aren't people that aren't they want sort of justice for their communities. They want what's right for their communities. They want their communities to thrive, and that's still very much there, I would say.
Within that, I guess if you want to call it a genre of society, is there a prevalent industry from a financial standpoint that most of them are involved in, or is it just all different types of shit?
Do you know what? It's all different types. It's all different types of shit. It's all different types.
So it would seem like finance, banking, loans, hedge funds, private equity, venture capitalists, whatever, would be kind of the primary thing with that, where they just have a fuck ton of money and they put it into different things. And
yeah, do you know what? We spoke about the economy, and there's a lot of money. You go to the Square Mile in London, London City. There's so much money there.
Yeah.
It's and when it comes to it's one of those. It's not what you know, it's what you know about who you know.
Yeah.
So I suppose the tables turn a little bit there.
Yeah.
So people go, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But when you're at that level, it's not what you know, it's what you know about who you know.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And it's
Yeah.
but it's working. Less and less. Discretion has gone out the window a bit in the UK.
In what way?
Is as in, everything is sort of so. Computer says no. This it says no. Where before it'd be, discretion was used a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What's your circuit? Oh, right. We can make this work. Right. What you got there? Yeah, that can make. Now you
out of my hands. I can't.
Yeah. You're hitting a ceiling constantly in the UK, and I think that's and the UK are very good at keeping that proportion of finance, keeping that proportion of the upper echelons in that world there.
Yeah.
To get to penetrate into that is extremely, extremely hard.
Yeah, that makes sense. At what point did you decide to get out of the military, and similar to coming in, was there a catalyst that kind of catapulted you into wanting to do the books and the shows and kind of leading into what you're doing now?
Once I'd done my third tour of Afghanistan, it was back end of 2010, going into 2011. At that stage, there was a lot of red tape around Afghanistan. We started, letting their security forces sort of take lead, and we had to sort of embed, what we'd done towards the back end of Afghanistan is we'd break down our team. We'd be a team leader with 4 Afghan security forces behind us. So we'll make up 4 teams of 4, but a TL with a special forces operator, and then local Afghan police, AMP or ANA, Afghan National Police, Afghan National Army, and we'd go on missions with them. But they were so bad that it would either cost the guys' lives, it would cost lives, tier 1 operators their lives, or what we'd end up doing towards the back end is we would breach the compound, but all the TLs would come together, create one team of 4, clear the compound, whilst the Afghans
blocking.
It's done like a security boundary, if you wish. And I didn't agree with that.
Yeah.
I just you got tier 1 operators who are putting their lives at risk, and my sniper partner got shot in the back of the head because he wasn't being given covering fire from a local guy.
Yeah.
And it's after my third tour of Afghanistan, I've just thought there's so much red tape around it now. It's becoming a bit bullshitty.
Yeah.
And this is where I think external politics start to take grip. That I was just like, do you know what? Done what I needed to do. I'm still young enough to go out and get a new career. I was 31 years old, and I just thought to myself, I remember coming back from New Zealand, thinking to myself, do you know what? I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done, and the friction between what was happening and some of the external politics that was coming in, it was just didn't allow us to be ourselves. It didn't allow us to do what we wanted to do and what we needed to do. That I was just like, I'm out.
Yeah. Was there an internal struggle as you transitioned out, like there are for so many special operations and or combat veterans, that there's that kind of almost loss of identity and lack of purpose? Did you go through any of that as you got out?
Yeah, I did. When I first left, it was definitely that lack of identity, that lack of purpose. But and I thought to myself, do you know what? Psychologically robust, I'm psychologically resilient. I can make this happen. But I suppose it's trying to fuse the two worlds together. They don't belong together. And the moment I tried to do that, I think that's where I started to struggle. And what I mean by that, the military world is completely different. Do not expect anyone outside the military world to understand what you've been through, how you're thinking, the thought processes that you have, and the dark humor that you possess.
Yeah.
Don't expect anyone to understand that.
Yeah.
Right? Don't even attempt to do it, because
Or
especially in
you're
this
going
day
to hear
and age,
from HR.
because you're going to hear from HR, right? Yeah. And vice versa, So when I left, I was like, right, how do I fit into society? And I sort of reversed engineered it. I thought, how did I fit into the military? Well, I acted like a military man. I had to pass a certain, sort of basic training to become a soldier. I had to think like a soldier. Right, okay, well, to be a civilian, I have to think like a civilian. I have to act like a civilian. Get that toe that's dipped into this world, which was so easily done. First year, I went straight into the security circuit. A close protection officer, went out to Afghanistan, went out to Sierra Leone, trained their troops, trained their first ever snipers to deploy to Somalia. And my foot was very much still in that military sort of realm, should we say. It wasn't until I was just like, the military aren't providing me any, I'm going out and grafting, I've got no top cover. I still feel like I'm in the military, I'm working with all my military pals still, but it's just not the same.
Yeah.
And I've got so much more to give. And then the TV opportunity, honestly, it literally fell on my lap. I got a phone call from a pal saying, look, there's this course that's going to start. And I then got a phone call from the channel saying to me, look, we want you to interview you for this show. We hear you're just out of the box, and we'd like to do an interview. And the rest was history, really. I'd done this interview with them, and they went, we love your personality, we love your character. Can you be the chief instructor on this course? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I said, right, what do we need to do? Literally wrote the course on the back of a cigarette packet. I was like, I said, that's what we need to do. And then the lads chipped in, and And before we knew it, from that interview to filming, it was like literally a few weeks, and we were filming this show called SAS Who Dares Wins.
Wow. And that, I assume, was life-changing in terms of kind of catapulting you into the public eye and limelight and being almost the face of British Special Forces as far as pop culture is concerned, right? I mean, because you were kind of the first guy to be in that position.
Yeah, absolutely. You got it bang on, Mike. And what happened was I was this close to not doing it. And when they said, look, you're going to be the chief instructor, because I knew that if they allowed me to run it, if they allowed me to structure this course, which I said to them from the very beginning, if you let me run a course, the production company, you can film it, but don't interfere with my course. You film it, and then between you and the channel, you can turn it into a show. That's fine. But we can't run a show. We have to run a course, because I need to get the recruits in a course mentality, not a show mentality. I need them to forget about the cameras. I've got my reputation to uphold. I know how to do this. Can you just leave me to my own devices? And at first they were like, yes. And because they said that, and they said, yes, you can be the chief instructor, I thought, do you know what, I'm going to do it. Because I knew that I could make something special out of it. And do you know what, it's one of those, a lot of people thought it'd just be a one-hit wonder, it'd be a great show, yeah, great to see what they're about. But when you film something or when you do something and you just know it's going to hit,
yeah.
I knew we had something special. And I remember being at the wrap party and someone went, oh, I hope we do another show. I said, we do another 5-6 shows, you watch. And they went, oh, that's, you're not that famous yet, Ant. And I'm like, no, I don't have nothing to do with fame.
Yeah.
I don't care about the fame. I'm not doing it for the fame. I know what I've delivered here. I know what I've done.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, the first series came out. And it was strange because when the first series came out, I was in Sierra Leone training the second batches of snipers to deploy to Somalia. They came under NATO,
yeah.
and their AI, their area of operation was Somalia. And I got a call from there saying, Ant, we need you back. I said, why? They said, we're airing this in 2 weeks' time. The media are doing backflips about it, are going mental about it, because it was, they give them little taster bits of it,
yeah.
and they want to meet the chief instructor.
Yeah.
I said, right. I said, I'll be back for the preview. And I said to the lads that were there, I said, I'll be back in a couple of weeks before I go back. And went back. My life changed overnight
Yeah.
to the point where I never ever went back on the security circuit. I never even went back to Sierra Leone to finish the contract. I just handed it over to a couple of pals of mine,
Yeah.
and I've never worked in the security industry since. And what happened was that kicked off, and then they were just like, wow, you need to do more TV. That led to a second series, led to me recreating the Mutiny on the Bounty from 1789, doing a series called Mutiny. Being in Captain William Bligh's shoes and going through, sailing 4,000 miles. That to doing Everest, filming Extreme Everest. That to Series 4, Series 5 of SAS Who Dares Wins. To Celebrity, 10 series in, then bouncing over to Australia, them capturing the format,
Yeah.
which is still booming there. And in between that, writing multiple books. I wrote First Man In, and it was at number 1 on the Sunday Times best-selling list for 5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And that book alone has sold over 1 million copies worldwide. 1 million copies of that book.
Yeah.
And then I wrote a second book, third book. Then, the £1 million contracts were coming in to write a further 2 more books. The tours were coming in where I was doing tours, seeing 75,000 people in one tour across the UK in theatres, and it just blew up.
Yeah. And what, from a pace standpoint, like you got 5 kids, family, you've already been gone a lot. Did there come a point where you're like, dude, I got to fucking take a break or step away or were you just, hey, strike while the iron's hot, it's opportunity, I got to take it? I mean, how did you kind of figure that out?
Do you know what? It's never been strike whilst the iron's hot, because I knew what I had. and I couldn't stop. You know, it's I'm not one to sit around. I'm not one to, you know, I've got to be active. I've got to be out and about. I've got to be doing something productive. But the overall messaging of SAS, which a lot of people don't realise, is, and my books that I write, self-help books, you know, talk about life lessons, my tours that I do, is the overlying message is I like to make people realise what they're capable of.
Yeah.
That is, you know, people are like, well, what's your job entail? And I'm like, making, you know, fulfilling people's true potential and making them realise what they're capable of. Well, how did you do that? I push them physically, psychologically and emotionally to their limits. I identify the tools within them, I extract them, I hand them back to them, you know, and that mission objective, my mission objective of making people realise what they're capable of, because I've been through the process and seeing the change in their eyes, whether I'm at a tour and I'm speaking to someone, a VIP that's come up to me and he's asked me a question, you know, when you see it in their eyes, whether I'm filming, you know, and people think I'm just screaming and shouting at people, but I see that I'm getting through to them, and all of a sudden they've achieved something that they never thought they could achieve.
Yeah.
That reward for me is what keeps taking me back. And a lot of people, like, Ant, you get so much shit now because the world's gone so woke, and you're screaming at women, you're screaming at men, you know. Yeah, that was, you know, when you first came out, that was, you know, you were the role model, but now this whole movement's come in, it's flipped overnight, and I'm like, yeah, but it's not about that. The easy thing to do is to go, I'll quit doing that, I'm not going to do that. I said, but the overlying message or the underlying message of this is, why would I stop from making people realise what they're capable? Why would I stop doing that? Yeah. If I can make you a better version of yourself through, you know, through a process that I know that works, whether that's through me writing it down on a book, you coming to a tour, you coming on my TV show, me getting a team to go up Everest or to climb K2, why would I stop that process? I said, so you can look at all the distractions and the external points, but the internal validation that it gives me outweighs and massively overrides all the external bullshit that I get.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's refreshing to see that, because, you know, those external pressures in most cases will cause people to deviate or pivot or stop doing things that they believe in. So that's awesome to see. One thing I was curious of, there were obviously women on the show. A relatively hotbed topic over the years here in the United States has been allowing women to try out for, and ultimately, if they pass the standards, to serve in special operations. What are your thoughts on women in special operations?
Doesn't work, mate.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say it doesn't work is if you look at how we're trying to bend over to get a woman to pass Special Forces selection or even Royal Marine training, is it worth everything that we're doing to get one woman to pass? Do the benefits weigh up?
No.
You know, the money that we're spending, what is she going to just be a super soldier, and all of a sudden, you know, she's going to be probably at the lowest ebb of a Special Forces operator anyway. Yeah. So where are the benefits here exactly? Now, is it going to benefit her when all of a sudden she goes into a unit and she realises, fucking hell, I'm at the bottom of the pile here?
Yeah.
You know, is it going to benefit the organisation? No, it's not. And again, I'm not saying that women aren't capable in certain roles, because women in surveillance roles are fucking brilliant. You know, hats off to them. You know, but when it comes to a tier 1 fighting force, you know, which ultimately is our role, then no, because the benefits just don't add up.
Yeah.
And they certainly don't supersede what already exists out there.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, why fix something that isn't broken?
Yeah. I agree. I mean, to me, the silliness of the kind of social experiment of it is baffling, because it's like you're talking about the highest stakes possible, and that's what you're trying it with. You know, it's like, try it with UFC or football or, boxing, it's like there's women and men's categories in competitive sports for a fucking reason.
Yep.
Like you're not going to try it in a game first. You're going to try it in real life or death circumstances. And to me, there's even a second component to that. Not just do you have to bend and make accommodations because it's a woman or even lower standards, which I couldn't disagree with more. But let's just say that you don't do any of that you don't make any accommodations. Say if you're going to train with men, you're going to live in barracks with men, you're going to shower with them, like there's no difference, there's no accommodations made, which they're not going to do, but let's just say hypothetically they did. And there's a female that manages to pass all of the standards without being lowered or compromised. Now, once she's in that unit, just the types of guys who are in those units being around women, like the shitstorm that ensues. I mean, because you see it already, when the intel chick is at a forward operating base, like it's a fucking nightmare, And again, it's like the negatives that you're going to get from maybe one or a handful of women making it through absolutely do not outweigh the cons, and not even close.
Not even close, Mike.
And to me, it's like if you're hell-bent on saying we want women special operators, then do like Israel has and have all women's special operators, like stand up a new unit. Like there doesn't need to be women SAS and women SEALs. Like stand up a female special operations unit where it's women cadre, it's women operators, and it's all women, and have at it.
Yep.
And then you can even do like, peacetime or training-wise, man versus man or woman versus man competitions and see how that fucking shakes out, have the all women's team take on an all men's team in a room clearing exercise and see how it goes, but it seems like that's every other guy within special operations has the same take, but yet it still seems to be this thing that they just keep trying to ram down everybody's throat, and I don't get it.
It's a box ticking scenario. So what's so dangerous about ticking a box is nowadays people are putting box ticking in front of capability and performance.
Yeah.
Now I get the box ticking. You go, right, we need capability, performance in front of it. If you're capable and you perform, then I understand. We can put the box ticking at the end and go, do you know what? Yeah, we need a female here. We need, whatever it may be. I get that part. But the moment you swap them over and you try and force box ticking into the capability and performance, lower standards, the benefits, not even comparable. You talk about the connection between it's a great valid point, but also what people don't realise is though in the UK, women can join the Royal Marines now. It's been like that for I think about 3 years, even maybe longer, might be even 4 years, Mike. Not one woman has passed the Royal Marines Commando course to become a Royal Marine Commando. They can't get past week 12. Now, Royal Marine Commando training is 32 weeks long. After week 12, you start carrying weight. That's when they start introducing some serious weight, proper weight, into your kit, into your rucks, into your Bergens, carrying your rifle, etc., etc. Then, grabbing your Oppo over your shoulder with full kit, having to do the 200-meter sprint with your full kit on, with your Oppo under a certain amount of time. They just can't pass it. Now, the reason why they can't pass it, and what a lot of people don't know, if you buried 100 men and 100 women, 1,000 years' time, you'd be able to identify them through their bone structure. Yeah. Now, I'm sure you're aware of this, but a lot of people aren't. The reason why women can't carry weight is because their hip structure's completely different to men. Now, if they bear weight on their shoulders and they put pressure on their hips, they crack their, they break their hips. And as you know, women are designed so their cervix opens and they give birth. It's a completely different structure to men's. Now, the damage that it creates on women when they carry extreme weight in the military it's already been proven, because women have sued the MOD because their pelvis, long-term health issues, long-term damage because of the weight that they've been asked to carry or they've been forced to carry, which they're not designed to do.
Yeah.
So that's why within the Special Forces, within the Royal Marines, within the paras, when you that's our bread and butter. We carry our houses on our back wherever we go.
Yeah.
Now that's where they struggle, and that's where the sticking point is that they cannot get past within the Royal Marines. Therefore, what's the next option there? To lower the standards, to lower the weight, to reduce the times. Because guess why they've got to do that? Because they've got to account for the millions and millions of pounds that they spent on the accommodation to separate the two. This is what I talk about, the benefits. You know, the actual, what are the, you know, everything that they're using from the, you know, resourceful wise, is it going to benefit when they do finally have one or two or pass?
No.
And I'm not even slightly. So again, going back to our conversation, it's a dead. And this is why I say no. I say, look, just leave it as it is. We're absolutely fine. We've got some phenomenal young men coming through, you know, who are tech savvy, who are, you know, what we spoke about before, who are great individuals. Let the men do their work.
Yeah.
Let the women do what they're best at. Come together. One can't function without the other. You know, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
You know, just stick to what we do best, and allow that process to naturally unfold.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Let's take a quick 5 and then just a few more things. And do you have a hard time to get out of here or no?
No. What time are you thinking, man?
I mean, we're getting close to being done, but
Cool. How long have we been going?
3:30. 3.5.
Gone 3.5 hours.
Oh,
Yeah, it goes by fast though.
Unless your teeth are floating, right?
Not yet.
Doing good? Doing good, brother. Doing good. You got time you need to be out of bed, man?
Oh, I'm good. I blocked off my whole day for you, man.
Ah, man, you're too kind.
No, it's serious though.
Thanks, brother.
I'm in rare air right now. So.
How are the guys?
They're good. They're good. They're doing their thing. I'll give Matt a call when we jump in the car and kind of hear some of our catch up. See how we operate between the two of us.
Going to? Yeah. The only easy day was yesterday. I wonder what one's that.
You were talking about the AC-130 gunships. This the 20mm cap from a shell from over Syria. They waxed a bunch of ISIS fuckers with those and then made coins out of the shells from it.
Fucking brilliant.
Yeah. Do you guys have coins? Like, is it something?
Yeah, we do, but it's not really
Not really a thing, though.
no. I think there's, do you know what? No, there's no set coin really, but I know that you guys love a coin, don't you?
Well, to me, like, it wasn't something I was ever, like, hugely into,
No, but they're cool because I've worked with the CIA have given me a coin,
Yeah.
And it's like...
But just doing this, I've gotten so many.
Yeah,
and
yeah, I can
because
imagine.
they all kind of have a story, you know.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I like it. I was saying to Amar, just to my pal there, just saying I wish I'd have kept more. You guys are good at keeping memorabilia. The Brits are fucking useless.
Really?
We don't even take fucking photos.
That's surprising.
I know. We were.
I gotta go back out.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to say. Because I've been doing this for 7 years.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
just
it's
been
probably some
kind of
revolution, yeah.
Well, it's like, add this here,
Yeah.
so I honestly, I'm not sure. It would take a little bit of figuring
No,
out.
don't worry about
Yeah,
it.
but, so yeah, the short answer is I'm not
It's
sure.
a cool setup though.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Is that nicotine? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, during the show, nicotine and caffeine, I pretty much ingest nonstop, but who am I kidding? Fucking even non-show days, I pretty much do it nonstop. But all good?
Yep.
All right, so obviously, you've had massive success with the shows, with books, with business, entrepreneurship, even to the point where you've had partnerships with Porsche and F1, is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Why not McLaren?
Do you know what? I know all the lads at McLaren.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, a lot of the teams in Formula One, the mechanics, the engineers, the team that really matters, that change all their tyres.
Yeah.
A lot of them are ex-military, British military.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
cool.
So I actually know the McLaren team.
Yeah.
I've been to their garages. They've shown me around.
that's
It's been
awesome.
it's been amazing. But Haas Formula One, I just built a relationship with them. I've done a couple of pre-seasons with them.
Oh, nice.
Just talking about mindset, about the importance of one another, team building, team bonding. I'd say more team bonding. Team building. I separate from team bonding.
Yeah.
You have to do team building before you do. You go on to team bonding. But those guys are under the pump.
Yeah.
You talk one little mistake, one little distraction that they might come into work with. One little emotional disconnect.
Yeah.
You name it. That's going to take off that fraction of a split second where that could be the difference between first and 10th.
Yeah.
So I just found quite a good little niche, and they seem to grasp it because they're at that elite level where that pressure cooker sort of environment, the stress, the emotional intelligence needed to hold back, those doubts that they have about themselves, how they're going to perform that day, the outcome, the fear of the outcome, the fear of failure, the fear of getting something wrong. So I find with high performance teams like that, it's not necessarily about the physical aspect of things because they're there, for a reason. It's more the psychological and emotional aspects that I sort of fuse together. I call it the trilogy. There's three parts of the being. There's the physical aspect, the psychological aspect, and the emotional aspect. Now you connect all three of that. There's a spiritual aspect as well. That's the fourth one. But a lot of people need to master the three before they become truly connected in that manner. So I find that a lot of people talk about now when it comes to team building, team bond, the physical and the psychological. The physical years ago just got on with it, and then all of a sudden sort of the head game sort of space came in, the psychological aspect, let's fuse the psychological with the physical. But they're missing a trick. And I think, within a couple of years, like the psychological aspect came in, the emotional aspect's going to come in. The emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? It's understanding the emotion for what it is, i.e. yourself, your emotion, and making it work for you. That's the smart bit about it, right? I think that's going to boom soon because we've had the psychological aspect of it and fusing those two together. But I really work on the emotional aspect of it, and the reason why, and you'll understand this, is it's an emotional game when you go through that door. It's here. It's not here. You're there. You're on target. You're fit. You're breaking things down. You know what door to go to. You can memorize what compounds are what. Psychologically, you're in the game. It's that moment of going through that door where it's no longer physical or psychological. It's the emotional harnessing of that fear, right? And it's something that is overlooked massively. So I really tap on that, and it seems to really, really work. And I believe that soon enough, it's gonna be all the rage where people are gonna talk about emotional intelligence and the emotional aspect of becoming a better version of who you are. Like they fuse the physical with the psychological, they're gonna be fusing the physical, the psychological, and emotional, which I've been doing now for about 3 to 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And it seems to really work amongst the elite sports teams, and not only the sports teams, the support teams that are under that fucking emotional pressure. Not psychological, because they know their trade. It's the emotional, how people are making you feel, how the situation's making you feel, how you're gonna deal with that emotion when it presents itself, or how someone else is gonna deal with that emotion when it presents itself.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like any high performer, in any industry, needs to master that same thing, and so that's a big part of what you do now. Do you do that same type of training with Porsche, or is that a different?
It's the same with Porsche. Their management team, or their CEO in Australia is he's a fit, intellectual guy, and they're all into their hour before work, really breaking down what's going on. And it's one of those, if you can come into work and I can make you function as an individual 2 or 3% better, just by knowing that something's up, or you've got something on your chest that you want to get off, and if I can make you function, like I said, 2 or 3% better, then the overall capability of the team is going to enhance. The overall performance of the team is going to be better, even if you break that down and it's 0.01%. It's still going to be better. So why wouldn't I go through that process every morning of making sure my team's okay physically, psychologically, and emotionally? And it doesn't have to be a whole breakdown or overanalyzing, overthinking. It just goes, right, you got anything on your mind? Just, something's not up. I might say to you, for example, hey, you're all right, and you know that you're not going to speak about it. You don't want to talk about it, okay? And you're not going to say, but just me acknowledging that I've seen an emotional disconnect there, just asking if you're okay, that could be enough. You know, that could be enough for you to go, fucking hell, I don't want to talk about it. But he's acknowledged it. Yeah. So, you know, that will warm your heart. That will make you think, right, I'm not by myself. You know, someone gets me. Yeah. And even if you're not a talker, just the acknowledgement. That's what I talk about, emotional intelligence, about other people recognizing that. Because it might be just something, you're all right, mate, you don't see me. Yeah, I'm cool, no worries. Right. Do you know what I mean? It's just those small things. And I think even like in business now, I know this because this is where I've come in and really helped grow certain businesses, but this is where I come in and sort of break things down to make that individual, and again, it's not so much a team thing, is to make that individual a better person on that day, so it can that can translate or bleed into the team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are you a car guy, generally speaking?
Yeah, I love cars. Yeah.
Do you have either a favorite car or a dream car?
Oh, do you know what? I went through a stage, and you might call me a Lamborghini wanker, but I went through a stage of
which is ultimately a Volkswagen wanker.
I went through a stage of I love the Lamborghini Urus. Now, for an SUV, for that to shift the way it does, and to move the way it does, is a phenomenal SUV. I love the Lamborghini SUV, the Urus, the Lamborghini Urus. However, when it comes to, I'm quite American. I love my big fucking trucks. Yeah. You know, I've got every time I hire a truck here, I get so excited. I'm like, what's the fucking biggest truck that you've got? You know, normally it's a GMC and fucking 4.5 litre, 5 litre. You know, so. I like something that you can handle. Yeah. You know, so when it comes to vehicles, I'm a bit of a speed freak. I'm a bit of a speed demon, so I do like fast cars, but I like my big burly trucks as well, because it's in America. You know how to do it. Yeah.
Well, and especially Dubai, like the car scene's pretty big there. I mean, they've got so much money and Euro exotics everywhere that like there's shit all over the place. I think even the police force has like some Ferraris and shit, right?
But do you know what? What I like about the UAE is, you can't beat a Toyota Land Cruiser or a Nissan Patrol. You know, when it comes to, let's talk about cars that actually fucking do their job and that can get through. You know, I'd much rather have a kitted out Nissan Patrol than a Mercedes G-Wagon, for example. Yeah. You know, because you can take those fuckers off road, and they're going through most stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, if you know how to drive, and you're picking up a good Nissan Patrol and you're picking up a good Toyota Land Cruiser, there's not much that will beat that when you're in that type of environment. Right. Yeah. So it's really it's courses for horses, really, isn't it? Or horses for courses, whatever way around it is. But I like to drive vehicles. You know, I like to just whack the paddles on, do my own gears, feel the RPMs, know when to get yourself out of trouble, shall we say? Yeah,
amen. I'm right there with you. In terms of what's next for you, obviously you're considering the mayoral run for London in a few years. Also politically, there's been, like I saw even Elon Musk supported or pledged his support to replace Nigel Farage for was it the Reform Party? Is that right?
Correct.
What are your thoughts on that? And I guess kind of, I have a book called Unfuck America.
I've seen it.
In terms of unfucking the UK, what would your approach be? What do you think of the Reform Party, Elon's comments, generally speaking, politically in the UK moving forward, and how you fit in, and just generally what's kind of next for you?
If there was a political party that I'm aligned with, it's Reform. Definitely need political reform in the UK. So hence the title. The clue's in the title with Reform. That's where my alignment would be. However, for me, London Mayor, I don't like to use the word capturing our capital city, but London used to be the crown jewel of the UK. you know, especially of Great Britain, especially of England, you know. It set the example around that nation. You know, you go in there, you'd experience British culture. You go in there, you'd know you was in England. You go in there, you would feel the pride, you'd feel the motivation, you'd feel the energy that fucking London gave you. None of that exists anymore. So for me, if I can do my part, there's a calling that I have to go back to the UK. And this time is not to serve my country, it's to serve the people. Because I can hear them screaming. I can hear them loud and clear. You know, when I mentioned before that, you know, I've can function in the underworld and the overworld, in politics, and my ear is all over the place. If there's ever a people's person to breach politics and speak for the people, then I believe that I can do that. So the London Mayor position, I sort of voiced my discontent with Khan probably 2 years ago. And then the echo chamber of support for me to run for the next mayoral elections sort of sucked me in. And it's something that I'm seriously considering doing. And you talk about Elon Musk, you know, through this whole process of me voicing my opinion on X and, you know, with the grooming gangs and Elon getting involved with that, and then Tommy Robinson, obviously exposing them. That whole make Britain great again, you know, let's be honest, that the Trump effect or the Trump wave is very much needed in the UK. And if I can help secure, you know, make London safe, my priority is to make London safe and secure. But also, you know, there's multiple strings to my bow. You know, I'm used to working with the economy. So, you know, when it comes to the business acumen side of things as well, I believe that I've got, you know, substantial experience now to not only come in and go, right, he's ex-special forces, he's an ex-soldier. Yes, he can secure and make London safe again, and you know, the people give people the safety, but he can also bring in his business acumen from what he's experienced, what I've experienced in America, and with these companies, to really give the 360 approach of, well, what can you bring to the city? Well, there's a hell of a lot I can bring to the city, and having the support from the general public, the support is big. It helps with my brand as well. Elon is supportive. He follows me on X and has you know, voiced a few things about myself running for mayor, which helps as well. And just having the backing again off of our American counterparts, which is so important, who are right now setting the example for the rest of the world, especially Western society, for their little brothers, let's call us the little brothers, to follow in suit and to adhere to what's happening in the US is a main goal for me. And I would say moving forward with sports.com, you know, doing a lot of filming, along with campaigning, I would say probably 2 years out, 18 months out for the elections in May 2028. They're my main priorities. But the calling to run for Mayor of London is huge.
Yeah.
It's really, really, really big. And again, like I said, I've served my country before, from the outside in. Now it's time to serve it from the inside out.
Yeah. Like I said, I love the idea. I think it's exciting and fascinating, and I hope you do it, and I hope you get elected. And I can imagine that this is the cart before the horse a little bit, but hypothetically, should you get elected or decide to run, get elected, et cetera, is an even higher level, a prime minister or something at that level, is that something that would appeal to you as well? Or is it more like, hey, let's just focus on this first and then see what happens?
I'm one of these, Mike. Once I'm in, I'm fully in. You know, I'm 100%. If you look at everything that I've done, and you can vouch for this, and you're very much in a similar position. You know, military, put my heart and soul into it, got to the top. You know, TV world, SAS, it's a household name in the UK, in Australia. I'm now going to be bringing it to the UAE. My books, straight to number one, you know, it's sold millions of copies around the world. If I take this plunge into the political realm, i.e. Mayor of London, then I'm not just going to do a term or two. It's going to be a whole new career.
Yeah.
So if that does come off, then expect to see me around for the next 20 to 25 years in British politics.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
What haven't you asked me that you should have? Do you know what, mate? You've pretty much covered everything. I think, you know, ultimately, I'm a family man.
Yeah.
You know, that's when people say, how do you describe yourself? Everything that I do, I have the support of my family behind me, my wife and my children. And that allows me to do what I want to do, you know. It takes a unique person like my wife to, you know, to be behind me, to allow me to, you know, go missing around the world for weeks on end. At least, like she says, at least I'm not getting shot at, and I'm not gone for 6 months at a time. But, you know, to allow me to really, you know, do what I do best, to be me, to be the best version of who I can be, to pass on to my children, to pass on to my wife. That is ultimately, you know, what my driving force is, knowing that I've got that support element behind me within a family, but also within a team. And I speak about, you know, my new sort of direction in life outside of filming, and that is business. And well, before I fused the family with the military, now I'm going to fuse my family with business. And whether that's, you know, running a city, whether that's running a company, whether that's getting to the top of you know, the NASDAQ, or the top of, you know, of the political world in that business sort of aspect, then that's exactly where I'm headed and the direction that I'm going. But the one common denominator behind it all is my family. And if I had to describe myself, it would be a family man.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. You know, I know your time here in the States is limited, and to be able to spend, you know, a good part of the day with you, asking you a bunch of dumb questions is an honor to do it. It's been great getting to know you. Pleasure to meet you, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Mike. Pleasure, brother.
I know we mentioned off camera at the last break that Englishmen typically aren't very memorabilia driven, but here in the States we are. So
I love it, mate. Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Likewise.
Yes, mate. I love a coin.
Yeah. So now you got another coin, and I can't imagine you'll find yourself, especially in the UA. It's kind of a complicated box.
Is it a trick? Do I have to try and open this now?
It opens from the bottom. It's kind of strange. It's like a flap that.
It's
part of special forces selection.
There we go. It's part of the selection process.
Yeah.
Mic drop. That's awesome, mate.
And you know, being an SPS guy, there's some tridents woven into the buckle there. But yeah, it's if you find yourself wearing cowboy boots and you want to throw a big fucking belt buckle on there, now we got you covered.
Never say never. I couldn't come to Texas, mate, and not go away with either a cowboy hat or a belt buckle this size.
Absolutely.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah,
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, buddy.
For the listener and viewer, I hope you enjoyed it. I know I sure did. And I would encourage you guys to both follow and support Ant in his next ventures and pay attention to everything that he's doing, because I have a sneaking suspicion we'll be seeing a lot more of you over the next few years. So hope you guys enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.